said, bowing, not curtsying, to Ariane. "Oh, there's no need for that, Arya. You're my family now," she said with a friendly smile, and she and Arya hugged. "Is this Nymeria?" she asked, kneeling to pet her. Arya said proudly of one of her best friends. "You named her well, after a great Dornish warrior woman," she said. "Men would be lost without the women in their lives, something that many forget," Arya commented. "You probably were Dornish in another life. You would have been a great warrior," Ariane complimented. "You really are beautiful." "Robb said that you were when he came back to Winterfell from King's Landing," said Arya. "Really? What else did he say about me?" she asked as her eyes lit up. "He said that there is more to you than the stories about you said, and that you were kind, clever, cunning and loyal to your family and your country," Arya replied. She blushed slightly at what Robb had told his siblings about her. "I'm glad to see them get on well. I wonder what it will be like for Harold when he meets her." Gendry 12. Gendry left Riverrun soon after the arrival of Robb's long-lost sister, Arya. He accompanied Robb, Harold, Prince Oberyn, Edmure and Sir Brynden to Maidenpool alongside 500 knights and riders. When he had heard of his uncle Stannis' death, though he had never talked with him properly or been acknowledged as his father's son by him, he was still one of the few family members he had left. He also heard that Uncle Stannis' wife, his Aunt Sliss, had fled to Brightwater Keep, the seat of her house Florent in the Reach. As for his only child, his daughter Shireen Baratheon, Gendry's cousin, she was said to be in the care of one of her father's loyal bannermen and friends, Sir Davos Seaworth. He also found out that Davos Seaworth was leading what was left of Stannis' army to Maidenpool. "Will I get the chance to meet her? She's one of the only family I have left that I know of who bear the Baratheon name," Gendry thought as they reached the outskirts of Maidenpool. It was daylight and they saw the army camped a mile outside of the walls. They still have the banners of Stannis amongst them, and the banners of their own houses, Harold noticed. "Yes. But will they be a threat and try and fight for Shireen's claim to the Iron Throne? That's the question we have to ask ourselves," said Edmure cautiously. "They've seen us," said Prince Oberyn, pointing at a large group of riders riding towards them. "They're a broken army, Edmure. They haven't got the stomach for a battle so soon after a defeat which resulted in the death of their king," said Sir Brynden as they rode slowly to meet them. Gendry looked at them. He recognized his uncle Stannis' personal sigil of a crowned stag surrounded by a burning heart. And there were the banners of Celtigar, Valerian, Barryman, Seaworth, Estermont, Connington, Swan, Tarth, Buckler, Foot, Wild, Whitehead, Selmy, Trant, Dondarrion, Stedman, Penrose, Caron, Caffin and Grandison. The houses of the Stormlands and of the Narrow Sea. But at the head of them was what looked like a short girl on a horse. Cousin Shireen. They stopped 10 feet in front of Robb and his entourage. "I am Robb Stark of Winterfell," said Robb. He still doesn't introduce himself as King Robb, not until he is formally crowned in King's Landing. "Your Grace, I am Shireen Baratheon," said Gendry's cousin, bowing her head to Robb. "Princess, welcome to Maidenpool and to the Riverlands. I am very sorry about your father. I knew him to be a good and honorable man from my time in King's Landing," said Robb. "Thank you, Your Grace," she said before a tall man with a short greying beard and a balding head rode next to her. He was using his left hand and his right hand was strange, as though his hand's bones were broken or he had no fingers on that hand. She smiled when she saw him and he smiled affectionately back at her. "He must be Davos Seaworth." "Your Grace, I am Sir Davos Seaworth. On behalf of what is left of King Stannis' army, I would ask that you allow us to join you and swear fealty to you," he said. "I am honored that you would come to me, Sir Davos. But do you not fight for Princess Shireen's claim to the Iron Throne?" Before he could reply, she said, "Your Grace, I swear that I don't want to be queen. Nor do I want the 7 kingdoms to be burned by that evil red priestess or people like her. My life was happy with my parents in Dragonstone, but then she came and she scared me with all of her talk of fire and death. My mother and my uncle Axel Florent were obsessed with her religion. She had done so many bad things and would have done more until Sir Davos killed her." Robb faced Sir Davos. "She was evil, plain evil, Your Grace. She had sacrificed good men and used dark and terrible magic. And before the battle at Blackwater Bay, she had plans to sacrifice, he didn't finish describing what he did as though he was angry over whom she had wanted to sacrifice. But Gendry understood immediately when he saw Davos' sad and furious expression. Did she want to sacrifice Princess Shireen? Gendry asked with a boiling fury. Yes, she did, sir. My insane Uncle Axel tried to grab me for the fire, but Sir Davos killed him and then her, she explained. She is brave and strong. People have said cruel things about her because of the grayscale that has harmed her since she was still a baby. But she is only a child still. She doesn't deserve such scorn. Had I been there when that red bitch tried to murder her, I would have smashed my hammer into her face until her head looked like blood-stained mashed potatoes. You and your army will be welcome additions to our own. When you are ready, we will come back to Riverrun for your army to rest and recover, said Robb. Thank you, your grace, said Davos, and he, Shireen and the lords of the Stormlands and of Dragonstone bowed to Robb. An hour later, they had all sworn oaths of fealty to Robb and they marched with them back to Riverrun. On the march, Gendry rode up to see Shireen. She was closely protected by Davos Seaworth and a few young men who resembled him. His sons, he thought. Lady Shireen, I apologize, but I didn't introduce myself earlier. I am Sir Gendry Baratheon, he said. Davos looked at him and said, I, the Stormhammer. When Stannis had first heard stories of you, he told me of when he saw in the Red Keep when you were squire to Harold Arryn and that you looked a lot like your father in his youth. He remembered that, he asked, surprised, for he had only met his uncle Stannis once. He had a fantastic memory. The best I've ever seen in any man or woman, said Davos. So, are you, my cousin? She asked sweetly. Yes, I am, my lady. I am the bastard of your uncle Robert, he replied. I'm glad that you're here. For the last few days, I was scared that I was the last of our family in the world, especially when Mother abandoned me and left for her old home, she said. No, never say that. You're never alone, you've got good friends like Sir Davos to help you with your life. You will never be alone, said Gendry. But why did your mother abandon you? Gendry asked, angry that her own mother would do that to her only child. I like the Seven and I still worship them. For a long time, she and Uncle Axel tried to convert me on the Red Priestess bidding, but I didn't want to, ever. I like believing in the Seven. They don't demand sacrifices and they don't want people or buildings to burn. And after Sir Davos saved me, she went mad and ran away, she said. I promise you, cousin, that I'll always be there for you and protect you, now that we're the only Baratheons in the world, Gendry promised, and then they shook hands. Interlude 3. Willers Tyrell, Daniel Sharman. How the fuck did it come to this? All of Father's schemes for Margaery to being queen, and now we have our backs up against the wall, Willers thought as he read reports from Grandmother Olenna's spies had sent him. Willers Tyrell was one of a few people whom his grandmother trusted and relied upon, as opposed to his father or mother. At a meeting in Highgarden's palatial keep, Willers sat in the hall with father, mother, Garland, Loras, Margaery, grandmother and all nobility of the Reach. Poor Loras. I hope that this war ends soon. I hate seeing him so sad ever since he lost Renly, Willers thought as Loras just stared at his platter and did and said nothing. So, now that we are all here, I think that the best course of action is to side with the Lannisters and join with Tywin Lannister, said father. That will mean that 5 kingdoms will be up against us, if it is true that the Stormlands and Dragonstone have joined with Robb Stark. I'm starting to think that father overestimates what the Reach army is capable of and underestimates Robb Stark for no other reason that he is a northerner. Robb Stark is a great warrior and commander, one whom has won more victories in 1 year than father has in 20. And father still insists on claiming the victories of Ashford and Fair Isle as his own. Have we received any letters from the Lannisters, my lord? Asked Mathis Rowan. We have. Tyrion Lannister has offered for Margaery to wed Joffrey if we join our armies with Tywin Lannister at Harrenhal. Combined with Tywin, we would number 130,000 men, said father, as though he has come up with such a genius plan. Lord Tyrell, if we did that and sided with the Lannisters, pulling all of our armies out of the Reach, what would protect the Reach and our homes from an invasion from Robb Stark or Balon Greyjoy? We cannot make the same mistake as Renly had done in leaving our homes unprotected, said Randil Tarly. Father reddened with embarrassment at being proven wrong in such a way. I should say something. If I don't, then we may just drag ourselves down to the shit if we make the wrong moves. My lords, that is one option we could take in siding with the Lannisters, but there is an alternative, said Willers, hurting himself as he stood up, resting both hands on his crutch. And what is that, Willers? Asked Uncle Paxter. That we side with Robb Stark. He has the might of 5 kingdoms behind him and has an army of at least 80,000 battle-hardened soldiers and knights under his command if reports are true. Robb Stark is a proven battle commander and tactician. And Tywin has been idle inside Harrenhal for so long, said Willers. How can we? Robb Stark won't just accept our allegiance just like that when we have no reason to. Nor do we have anything to offer him, said Uncle Baelor. If reports are true, Balon Greyjoy is assembling an enormous armada of ships at Pike for a full-scale invasion of the north to make Robb Stark suffer for killing his brother and pushing back what was supposed to be his master plan to restore the Ironborn old ways, Willers explained, whilst Grandmother looked proud of him. I don't think I've ever seen Grandmother look at father like that. So, we side with Robb Stark and offer to fight the Greyjoys, asked Garlan. Not quite. If reports are true, Tywin has hired nearly every sellsword army in Essos to come to Westeros to fight Robb Stark. Whilst we ready our army, we should also ready our navy and sail it in a surprise attack and burn all of the Iron Fleet at Pike. Whether Tyrell, Stark or Lannister, the Greyjoys and their piratical raids affect us all, said Willers. Numerous lords nodded at his idea, more than those who agreed with father's plan. When it was just the Willers, father and grandmother alone in father's solar, father said, what are you thinking, Willers? If we side with Robb Stark, then Margaery won't be queen. We have more important things to worry about, father. At least with my plan, we wait until we see whom the victor is in the fight between Robb Stark and Tywin's Essosi sellsword army. And whomever wins, we offer the destruction of the Greyjoy fleet as a peace offering and a sign of our allegiance. And if the Starks lose, then we attack the Riverlands, said Willers. Mace, the boy has an excellent plan. I say that we use it, said Grandmother. But Margaery won't be queen if we side with the Starks, father complained. Maybe not, but in the future perhaps a Tyrell can become a queen. Just not Margaery. We just have to play this to our benefit. We had the chance of siding with Renly Baratheon or Robb Stark at the very start of this war, and we made our choice. We have to live with that and improvise where we can if we want some victory out of the mess we have made, said Willers. Willers, my dear boy, I think that you are overestimating Robb Stark. Yes, he has won a few victories, but that is just it, said father. Gods grant me patience, please. Father, you are underestimating him. He has won more victories in less than 2 years than you have in 20 years. He's a brilliant military commander and his army are all battle-hardened men. He has the might of 5 kingdoms behind him and all of his armies have great morale and believe in him. If we fought against him tomorrow with our entire army, I'm certain we would lose, for most of our army are untrained and inexperienced, said Willers, annoyed at his father's attempts at pretending that he was a great warrior. House Tyrell will not be able to resume growing strong if we do not ally ourselves with Robb Stark, said Grandmother. Chapter 34, Chapter 32. Chapter Text. Harold 12. My beloved Harry. I am very happy here in the Eyrie. The weather and the fresh air and riding on the grounds remind me so much of Winterfell. Sissy is such a kind and sweet woman and Alis is such a beautiful little girl. Robb did say that she looked like you, and he was right. Thank you for the news about Arya. Lady and I will come to Riverrun soon to meet her. We will leave for Riverrun 2 days after I send this letter. And lastly, there's one very important thing to say. I am with child. 3, possibly 4 moons now, Maester Coleman says. I love you so much and I am very excited to see you soon. Sansa. Harold read and reread the letter from Sansa soon after arriving back in Riverrun. Sansa and I will have a child. Upon reading it he ran up to Robb, whom was talking with Arya and Catelyn Stark. Harold, what is it? Robb asked. I'm sorry, but Sansa is coming to Riverrun. And she says that she is with child, he said, beaming with excitement and showing them the letter. Congratulations, Harold. I can only hope that our children grow up as friends, said Robb. Oh, I'm sure, though my sons and daughters will be fighting and defeating your children in every duel and joust, Harold said before Robb playfully punched him. Gendry congratulated him when he told his former squire the news. By the gods, my life has changed in far too many ways since I won that tourney at Runestone and was knighted. I'm Lord of the Uri and am officially an Arryn. But most important of all, I am married to such a wonderful woman whom I could only have dreamed of marrying as a boy, and now we are having a child. With the arrival of the former army of Stannis Baratheon, the allied army of 5 of the 7 kingdoms now numbered 81,000. Sir Davos Seaworth had brought 22,000 men with him from King's Landing and also 8,000 wounded. They had lost all of their supplies in the aftermath of the Battle of Blackwater Bay and had arrived in the Riverlands, suffering from exhaustion and hunger. Harold was glad to see Gendry was happy in a way that he had never seen before. He was so happy to meet his little cousin Shireen. The two were spending lots of time together, talking about their lives and who they thought the greatest Baratheon was. I'm glad that he can spend time with someone from his own family. It must be like having a little sister for him, he thought. When talking with Gendry he asked him how is young Shireen. She is well. She is such a kind and sweet little girl. I don't understand why people would say such cruel things about her, just because of her grayscale, Gendry said. I'm glad to see that you aren't the only Baratheon left in the world and that you now have a family member whom you are on good terms with, Harold said. Thank you, Harold. Talking with her, I see that she just wants to live peacefully in Dragonstone, he replied. Dragonstone? Not Storm's End as is her birthright? Harold asked. No. She said that she loves Dragonstone and that it's always been her home. I'll see if Robb will talk with her about Storm's End and House Baratheon's future there, he said. Do you not want to be Lord of Storm's End and Lord Paramount of the Stormlands? He decided not to ask him this until he was sure that being the Lady of Dragonstone was all that Shireen wanted. In Lord Hoster's Solar, Harold, Gendry, Sir Davos, Prince Oberyn, Lord Harmon Euler, Lord Eldon Estermont, Ed Muir, Sir Brynden, Ricard Karstark, Great Jon Umber, Bronze Yohn, Nestor Royce, Arianne, Catelyn and Robb met. What news is there regarding the sellsword armies? Robb asked. They were spotted sailing past Cracklaw Point and Dragonstone yesterday, Your Grace. Hundreds of ships. My estimate would be at least 100,000 men, said Nestor Royce. That would bring their numbers to less than 150,000 if they manage to join up with Tywin Lannister, said Ed Muir. Do we hit them as they land, Your Grace? Asked Eldon Estermont. We've no way of knowing where they land, Lord Estermont. What news of the Tyrells and the Reach army? Robb asked. More than half of them have gone home, the rest are standing ready in case they decide what to do. But the Redwynes have now joined them, having previously kept out of the war due to Lord Redwyne's 2 sons being held hostage in King's Landing. They escaped during the battle, Your Grace, said Nestor Royce. Not only does that give them the Redwyne army, but also their navy, one of the largest in Westeros. What about the Ironborn? Do we know of when or where they will invade? Robb asked. They've got their ships ready, Your Grace, but we have no idea of whom they will attack, said Nestor Royce. Has there been anything from Theon? Harold asked. He said in a recent letter that his father has died recently, falling from a bridge. And at a Kingsmoot, his treacherous uncle Euron has returned to the Iron Islands, with over 50 ships and pirates, and he has been elected King of the Iron Islands, he explained. Euron Greyjoy. There's someone whom I would love to kill, said Sir Brynden. I've heard of him. Uncle John said that he was a dangerous and evil man whom burned the whole Lannister fleet and that he had raped his brother Victorion's wife and she killed herself afterwards, Harold thought as he looked at the map of Westeros. We march to confront Tywin's sellsword allies before they can become a serious threat to us, said Robb. What of Tywin? Asked Gendry. Our spies say that they are running low on supplies and Tywin is angry that he's been trapped in Harrenhal for so long and now wants to return to King's Landing, said Bronze Yohn. How long will it take for our whole army to get to the Driftmark's coast? Asked Ricard Karstark. A week, maybe 2. By then, they'll have landed and we will know where they are and where they intend to march to, said Sir Davos. We run the risk of leaving the Riverlands undefended if the entire army marches to fight them. Either Tywin or Euron Greyjoy could launch an attack, said Arianne. The castles are well supplied and defended, thanks to Lord Edmure's marshalling of all troops of the Riverlands. If either Tywin or Euron Greyjoy launched an attack, We can call for reinforcements from Dawn and the Vale, Robb said with certainty. Now that she was his queen, Robb was including her in sessions such as this because he, Harold, Gendry, Oberyn and Catelyn knew of her cunning and that she was a capable planner. The next morning, 5 days after the old army of Stannis joined them, 80,000 soldiers and knights marched from Riverrun, with Robb leading them. Harold was glad to be going back to fight in a battle. But even though he looked forward to it, he was afraid. He had always been afraid before a battle, but this time he was even more so, for he was a married man now and his wife was with child. My children will not grow up without a father like the way my parents died when I was a little boy, Harold promised himself as he rode alongside the Knights of the Vale. Robb 12. Sir Jasper Redfort and his scouts arrived at Robb's encampment 20 miles south of Duskendale. Your Grace, the sellsword armies have all landed and were marching to Duskendale before they discovered that we are here, he said in Robb's tent. Do you know how many they number, Sir Jasper? Robb asked. 130,000, Your Grace, 110,000 infantry and 20,000 cavalry. As I said, Your Grace, they know that we are here and they prepare for battle now. They'll be here by morning, he replied. 130,000, that's the greatest army that's ever assembled here in Westeros, perhaps even the world. Far bigger than Renly Baratheon's army. This will be the greatest battle in all history of Westeros. Let them come. And with them, we will finally bring this war to an end. We must defeat them here, and then we can take the fight to King's Landing. Robb looked at the map of the fields of Duskendale, and began drawing the battle lines. What are your orders, Your Grace? Asked Eldon Estermont. He and all lords looked nervous at the numbers of foes soon to face them. Robb overheard several of them talk about taking Duskendale and using it as a base to hold against the sellsword army before launching a full-scale attack on them. But Robb knew that he had to offer them battle before they could get too comfortable after weeks at sea. We will spread our lines as far we can. The infantry will march at a slow pace to get closer to them, forcing them to fire arrows on us. They'll send their cavalry to hit our flanks. As they do, I want our own cavalry to defend our flanks. They'll send their infantry to charge as our lines progress. When they do, I want the full might of the Knights of the Vale to appear on the right flank and the extra heavy cavalry and knights to attack the infantry's rear. That will make them think that they will attack the rear of the infantry. But that's not what they will do, Your Grace, asked Bronze Yohn. No, instead, they'll attack the enemy's main positions, attacking their commanders and their archers. All whilst our light cavalry hit the enemy infantry on their right and left flanks. And once the Knights of the Vale and heavy cavalry have finished, they will smash the remainder of the enemy infantry just as they realize that they have no way out, but backwards, Robb said, using the wooden sigil pieces to show them his plan. The lords and commanders thought over his plan and the majority seemed to be agreement and voiced their opinions. It's an excellent plan, Your Grace. But how many of their heavy cavalry will be on the left flank in support of the Knights of the Vale? Asked Prince Oberyn. The same number as the Knights of the Vale, my prince. 2,000 Lord Arryn will command the Knights of the Vale. And Prince Oberyn will command the heavy cavalry, he finished. The next day, soon after eating a quick breakfast, Robb drew ice and climbed onto his horse as he watched his army form into the positions he had thought of. He rode out in front of them. Men of Westeros. Soldiers, knights and lords. Soon we will fight the sellswords of Tywin Lannister. Sellswords like them have plundered the Riverlands, raiding, murdering men, women and children. Cowards like them are coming to face us right now. In King's Landing, an inbred coward who thinks himself a great king sits on the Iron Throne. He is a man who enjoys torture and murder. He will have such fates in store for us if we fail today. Will you fail today? No, came a reply from the army. No, indeed. For today, we fight. And by this year's end, I swear to you, this war will end and there will be a lasting peace in the Seven Kingdoms. Tywin Lannister wants all of Westeros to bow to the Lions of Casterly Rock. But we will not kneel today or tomorrow to them. For today, we fight. Tonight, we will be drunk. And tomorrow, we will go back to Riverrun, victorious. This great army in the many thousands cheered for him as he rode up and down the army's front. He raised ice and cheered with them before he turned to see the great sellsword army stopping their march. This is it. This battle will decide Westeros' fate, Robb thought as he turned to the Great Jon and Sir Brynden. He waved ice for them to see. "Forward march," was shouted across all of the lines before Robb climbed off of his horse and stood in the center with the heavy infantry. As they marched across the field, Robb looked up in the sky. "Come on, are they going to shoot at us or do they want the heat of the sun to tire us down until we fall asleep?" His answer came soon after, when arrows started flying across the sky. "Shields up! Shields up!" was shouted across the lines. Robb lifted his shield above his head. He panted as arrow after arrow pierced into his shield. He looked at the flanks repeatedly. He could see their cavalry fast approaching their own flanks. Yes, that's it. Like a deer walking to a watering hole, whilst the wolf waits in the bushes, Robb thought with a grin. "Charge!" came the shout from Bronze Jon as he led light cavalry to attack the enemy's cavalry on the right, whilst Eldon Estermont commanded the other force of light cavalry. "Fire!" came the order for the archers, before they fired at the enemy cavalry. Several enemy horns blew from the command line. The infantry began to advance, spearmen at the front and heavy infantry in the middle and light infantry at the rear. Robb took several deep breaths as he gave the order halt. The infantry all halted as the enemy infantry advanced onto them. And Robb turned to his left and then to his right and saw the Knights of the Vale on his right and the heavy cavalry on his left. Again, the enemy archers fired onto them. Robb's face twisted as he watched as men on his left and right fell, arrows wounding them or killing them. "Old gods, let me live long enough to see Arianne give birth to our child. Give me this mercy and I will plant weirwood saplings everywhere in the Kingswood and in the Red Keep gardens and plant a proper heart tree in the Red Keep Scotswood." The enemy infantry was running down the slope towards them. "Spears and shields! Spears and shields!" Robb shouted. Spearmen held their shields up and kept their spears back, ready to thrust on his command. Robb held his shield tightly in his left hand and raised ice in his right hand. And now, death, he thought as the archers stopped firing on them. A spearman thrust his spear towards Robb, he blocked it with his shield and cut his throat with ice. Another tried to stab his head. He dodged it and snapped the spear with a downwards thrust of his shield and stabbed him. An axeman charged at him and sliced his axe onto Robb's shield. Robb dropped the shield soon after the axe hit the shield, and then Robb sliced across, cutting the man's head off as his axe was caught in the ground. Robb stabbed a man as he was about to throw a spear. He took the spear and threw it as far to the back as he could. It caught a man in the upper body, he fell down onto his back, at first trying to push the spear out as he gargled on blood, before he breathed his last as he choked on his own blood and his hand let go of the spear. And as Robb fought the infantry, the heavy cavalry and the Knights of the Vale began an enormous surprise charge at the enemy's command line and their archers. Robb saw for himself when he noticed that the arrows weren't firing on them. "Come on, lads. Push them back, and victory will be ours and this war will soon be at an end." Robb shouted, and his reply was many cheers and roars from his own men as he sliced his sword down, cutting a spearman from the throat to his sternum. The cavalry attacked the infantry on all sides, hammering the enemy infantry. "Just as we planned, now they have no way of escaping." Robb grinned as he could see the panic in the faces of the enemy and he could hear it in their voices as soon they all glanced at their surroundings. Whether to their left flank, their right or to their rear, they were surrounded. "Attack the flank! Come on, lads! Together! We won't lose today," shouted a man dressed in fine armor befitting that of a high-ranking officer of the Golden Company. Just as Robb cut down a large man whom wore only a leather cuirass, he saw as this Golden Company officer charged at the flank, only for cavalry and knights to ride down his attempt to escape from their trap. Robb smirked at watching their escape fail before he blocked a blow from a large man, whom looked and dressed like what he imagined a Dothraki warrior to wear, and he tried to cut down Robb with his scarily sharp arrow. Robb caught the blade and punched him hard in the face. The Dothraki tried to attack him again, only for Robb to block the blow and slice down on the arrow. He blocked the blow, only for ice to break the arrow and eviscerate him. "Come on, lads. Today is ours. Victory is ours, as I promised you." Robb shouted as he stabbed the sky with ice and the infantry cheered with him. Robb looked back at the enemy infantry and saw how afraid they looked. It wasn't long before the remainder of the infantry laid down their weapons and surrendered. Robb accepted their surrender. They had won. In the command tent, Robb took off his armor and washed himself with water whilst Oliver cleaned his blooded armor and ice. "Your Grace, the last of the sellswords have taken to their ships and are sailing home," said Sir Brynden as he walked inside the tent. "What are our losses?" Robb asked. 7,000 dead and 25,000 wounded, Your Grace, he replied. "And theirs?" Robb asked, angry that so many of theirs had died. 50,000 dead, 50,000 wounded, and the rest were the ones who surrendered. "We've done it. We've really done it. Now the war can end and then we can deal with the Iron Islands." Chapter 35, Chapter 33. Chapter Text. Interlude 4. Garland Tyrell, Owen Macken. 80,000 winning against 130,000. That's fucking incredible. Willers was right for us to wait to make the right move. Had we done what Father said, we would have had our asses kicked by the young wolf by now, and tens of thousands of men of the Reach would be dead or wounded. In spite of what Father may believe, glory isn't worth sacrificing tens of thousands of good men for they all have families back home, Garland thought as they sat in the palatial keep with Willers, Father, Mother, Margaery, Laura's grandmother and the nobles of the Reach. "I think that the Battle of Duskendale should be clear proof that Robb Stark is an undefeated commander and that we would be fools to try and fight such a man and his army," said Willers wisely. "I agree, Lord Willers. Against an army of 130,000 sellswords, Robb Stark has shown he is perhaps the greatest military tactician in all of Westeros history," said Mathis Rowan. Garland looked to his father, whom looked annoyed, as though it was clear that Margaery wasn't going to be queen. "If we fight against Robb Stark, then Robb Stark could award Highgarden to the Florents, Oakhurts or Rowans, all of whom have a claim to Highgarden stronger than House Tyrell ever had. It's better if we side with him now and focus on the future, where a Tyrell can be queen. There's no sense in obsessing about that now. Lord Tarly, what say you? If we joined Tywin Lannister, do you think we could defeat Stark?" asked Father, looking as though he was hopeful that the Lord of Hornhill shared his optimism that Robb Stark could still be defeated and that Margaery could be Joffrey's queen. "No, my lord. Against such a man who can defeat an army of 130,000, the largest army ever formed in our history, we would have no chance of victory. Especially since our army is too soft from the marching under Renly Baratheon's command, whereas Stark's army are all hardened from battles, victories, and follow a true warrior and king who commands and inspires," said Randyll Tarly. Father sat back down, annoyed. "So, it's decided, my lords and ladies. The Iron Fleet is still anchored at Pike. We will sail and crush it in a surprise attack and pledge our allegiance to the Starks and our help in quelling the Ironborn and killing Euron Greyjoy," said Willers, before Father could say anything. At that, all the Reek lords voiced their agreement, whilst Father was forced to sit and keep quiet, seeing them all agree to Willers' proposal. "Sir Baelor, Lord Paxter, send ravens to Old Town and the Arbor, we sail for Pike," said Willers. "So, we sail for Pike for a surprise attack. The Greyjoys haven't been making themselves popular by their piratical raids on the north, the Riverlands and the Westerlands. Burning the Iron Fleet will be a fine revenge for all of their raids on the Reach years ago." In Father's solar, Father was unhappy. "Don't you see what this means? Margaery won't be queen if we side with Robb Stark." Father asked Willers. "Father, what chance do you think we have if we fought Robb Stark? You heard what Lord Tarly said. Do you really want to gamble the lives of tens of thousands of Reachmen for a tiny chance of making Margaery the queen? Against an enemy such as Robb Stark, we would have no chance of winning," Willers asked. "Mace, for goodness sake, what will you do if you fight Robb Stark?" "Win against him. He's won more victories than you ever have and seen more war than you ever have," said Grandmother. "Mother, I think that I know more about war than he does. I've been fighting longer than he has been alive," said Father, pathetically. "Mace, you've fought in one battle. One. And that was more Randyll Tarly's victory than yours. And you sat around and dined on good food and wine whilst starving Storm's End for a whole year, all whilst Rhaegar Targaryen died on the trident to Robert Baratheon's hammer. And you barely did anything in the last Greyjoy rebellion," said Grandmother. Father had no reply for Grandmother's comment, and it was then that Willers spoke before Grandmother berated him even further. "Father, right now, there is nothing stopping Robb Stark from taking King's Landing. Nothing except for the Iron Fleet, preparing to sail and invade. Tywin Lannister has fled Harrenhal for King's Landing. If we destroy the Iron Fleet, we can show our dedication to an alliance with Robb Stark and pledge our fealty to him, said Willers. Whilst you sail for the Iron Islands, myself and Margaery will go to Riverrun and pledge Highgarden's fealty to Queen Arianne, said Grandmother. It was then that Father looked as though he had thought of something clever. Oh no, please no. Father, whatever you're thinking of, don't say it. Not unless you want another tongue lashing from Grandmother. Yes, and while you are there, we can find proof that Arianne Martell has been unfaithful to Robb Stark, said Father with a greedy smile. Gods, this ambition of his will cause our house's downfall, Garland thought as he rolled his eyes. I think that highly unlikely, Father, said Willers. What are you talking about? She's a Martell and a whore, just like her uncle. Of course, she has been unfaithful to her husband. And when he does divorce her, he can marry Margaery, said Father, with a self-satisfied grin as though this was a genius plan. Mace, I think that highly unlikely. My spies never lie to me, and they've all said the same thing about Robb Stark's queen. That she has never once laid with another man or woman ever since they were wed. And not to mention that she is heavy with child, said Grandmother. It doesn't matter if she has been, that your spies don't know of. It's all there. Her reputation speaks for itself. She has clearly been sleeping around with men and women most of her life. All you must do is plant a seed of doubt and then we can capitalize on it, said Father before he clicked his fingers for dramatic effect. Meanwhile, Garland looked at Margaery, who looked unhappy. Garland gestured for her to speak, after the talk that he had with her soon after they came back home after Renly's murder. Father, I don't want to be queen. Father turned to face Margaery, he looked shocked. Marge, what do you mean, he asked. Renly was murdered by his own brother's hand. I don't want that to happen between any children of mine just for a crown, she explained. But, Margaery, you've wanted to be queen for a long time now, ever since you were first studying your lessons, said Father. Not anymore. Willers is right, we can focus on making a Tyrell queen in the future, but right now we have to secure our own future by bringing ourselves into Robb Stark's good graces, she said. Grandmother beamed proudly at Margaery for her words whilst Father just nodded and then hugged Margaery. The next day, Garland, Loras and Father said goodbye to Willers and then to Margaery and Grandmother as they left for Riverrun, and they left for Old Town with the army of Highgarden. After boarding their ships, they sailed for Pike. They sailed past the Shield Islands unopposed on board their ship, Highgarden's Glory. On the 8th day of the voyage, Father looked from the top deck and said, "This is it. They have no idea that we are here. Tonight, the fires will be seen from all over the Seven Kingdoms," Garland commented. And after all of this, I can go back home to Leonette and be away from all of this, Garland thought as he thought about his wife. "My lord, we can see the Iron Fleet," said Archerus O'Hylin, the ship's captain. "Has Lord Redwyne sent a signal, Captain?" asked Father. "Yes, Father." "Look," said Loras, pointing at Uncle Paxter's ship, the Arbor Queen. A flaming arrow was seen in the sky above the Arbor Queen. "It's time for war," Garland thought. Catapult shots, ballista and arrows lit with fire fired at the docked Iron Fleet. Ships burned here and there as Pike and Lord Sport woke to the smoke of hundreds of ships burning and an enemy fleet attacking the rest. But as Garland turned away from the fires as they burned so bright that it almost hurt him looking at them, he saw ships coming towards them. "Father! Some of them are coming straight for us," he shouted, as he drew his mace and his sword. "Prepare to repel boarders, lads." "To your positions," shouted Captain O'Hylin as he and Loras drew their swords whilst Father looked too taken by surprise to act. Garland placed his sword near the side and grabbed a harpoon as a ship sidled next to theirs. He threw the harpoon and watched as it impaled its first mate. He grabbed his sword as their captain waved his large axe around as he shouted, "Board the fuckers. Let's show these flowers how real men fight." Two men climbed aboard and Garland split the head of one with his mace and slit the throat of the other with his sword. For as long as he could remember, Garland would train with two weapons and also spar against 3 men at a time, so that he would be ready for the real thing if it came to it. He watched as Loras killed 3 as they came towards him. Captain O'Hylin threw a harpoon at one and it impaled him and the man standing directly behind him. Garland spotted their captain and Garland cut down one man and bludgeoned another before he came face to face with him. The captain chopped across a sailor's knee and then beheaded him before burying his ugly axe into the skull of a sworn knight of Highgarden, Sir Garth Swynford. The captain charged at Garland with his large and ugly axe and tried to slice across at him with it, aiming straight for his head. Garland easily blocked it with his sword and then smashed his mace across his face. He fell to his knees, but was still alive until Garland smashed his mace onto his skull, blood and brains spilling from it before he fell and landed on his back. Loras killed the last two before Garland looked around to see a few of their own ships get captured by angry and vengeful Ironborn. The Arbor Queen burned those ships captured by the Ironborn and then burned their ships as well. Garland looked at the burning fleet. It was an extraordinary sight. Hundreds of ships burning and many were exploding and simply falling into the shallow waters. Are there any others trying to escape the carnage and fight us? Loras asked. No, I think that is all of them aflame, my lord, said Captain O'Hylin. Excellent. We've done fine work here tonight. Let the Ironborn remember this day before they ever have any ideas of rebellion or piracy on our fair shores again, said Father. Garland looked and saw two flaming arrows from the Arbor Queen. Father, a signal from the Arbor Queen. Garland said. Father looked and said yes. Captain, we leave now. Let the Iron Islanders pick apart the remains and try and rebuild their once great navy. We sail for Seaguard. Ariane 12. It had been 6 moons ever since Ariane had first learned she was with child. She was glad to have her good mother and her cousins alongside her, and now her Aunt Elaria Sand, whom had come from Sunspear after being apart from Uncle Oberyn for so long. She had also brought 2 of Ariane's cousins, Sarilla and Elia Sand. How is it in Dawn? Ariane asked when welcoming her to Riverrun. The whole of Sunspear was celebrating at seeing the corpses of Clegane and Lork hang from the gates. They were food for the crows for 2 whole moons before they were nothing but bones. And when the news of your wedding to Robb Stark was announced and that you carry his child, there has been so much celebrating that there will be a Dornish queen and a half-Dornish heir soon, she said proudly. And it was soon after Aunt Elaria's arrival that Sansa had returned from the Eyrie. Ariane was happy to see Sansa and Arya reunite, after over a year of separation. Though Arya was only 5 and 10, she could see that she was far stronger and tougher than any Dornish boy or girl that age or even older. Indeed, she got on very well with the Sand Snakes, whom were impressed with her stories from her time in Braavos. The children of Ned Stark are true direwolves, especially when they are together in a pack. Fucking stupid is the one who tries to make an enemy of not one, but the whole pack. Seeing Arya and Sansa reunite brought back memories for Ariane of her, Quentyn and Tristan. She missed her 2 brothers. Despite all differences and that Quentyn would rule Sunspear, Ariane loved her brothers and father and mother. I hope that they will be in King's Landing in time for the coronation of Robb and I. On the day that Robb left, he and Ariane spent the morning in bed. When this is all over, I want us to go to visit Sunspear. I want to see what it's like there and where my wife grew up, and then for us to visit Winterfell, Robb said as Ariane rested her head on his muscled chest. Gods, how did he get so strong? Do you remember when we first met and I told you about Sunspear? She asked with a seductive grin as she looked at him, remembering how she smiled at him when they met. I remember, nor will I ever forget. You said that in Sunspear, there is the best food, drink, beautiful gardens and the best company, in public and in private, said Robb. And as he finished, Ariane sat up and gently pushed Robb down and climbed on top of him. Let me give you a little taste of what to expect before such a day comes, she said as she took his hands and placed them on her breasts before she reached down. Gods, this is harder than a wall. And it was soon after Robb and the army marched from Riverrun, that Tywin Lannister and his army had left Harrenhal and marched for King's Landing. They didn't try to take Riverrun or ambush Robb's army. They just marched to defend the city. They must have left Harrenhal thinking that Robb was marching for King's Landing, Ariane thought when she heard the reports. Harrenhal was recaptured by Free forces led by Lord Stephen Free, whom took it with 1,000 men a day after they had learnt of Tywin Lannister leaving it. The phrase may be slow when joining battle or take a noticeably long time when following their liege lord's orders, but when they are on their own and have to capture a defenseless target, they outshine all others, but only at that, Ariane thought when she gave the order to the ambitious Stephen Free when he beamed with pride at being trusted with the liberation and garrisoning of Harrenhal. More than 2 weeks after Rob had left Riverrun, Arianne was talking with Sansa in the solar of Lord Hoster Tully when Maester Vimen joined them. "Apologies, your grace, my lady." "A raven from his grace." Arianne eagerly opened the letter. "What does it say?" Sansa asked with worry. "They've won. Rob's defeated the sellswords and sent the last of them back home to Essos." "An army of 130,000, Arianne said with excitement. "That's larger than any other army in Westeros history. The minstrels and the maesters will write songs and books about the Battle of Duskendale for years to come. And they'll write about Rob as one of the best leaders and warriors in all of Westeros history." The two good sisters hugged and Arianne thought about seeing Rob. "Now we are so close to peace. And that the Lannisters will be thrown out of King's Landing and we will finally have peace. Rob and I will be crowned king and queen and our child will be the heir to the Iron Throne." Arianne often found herself daydreaming as she thought about the future. "All my future will be with Rob and our family." 6 days after hearing of the victory of the Battle of Duskendale, Arianne was handed a letter from Maester Vimen. It was from Olenna Tyrell, the infamous Queen of Thorns and matriarch of the House of Tyrell, and was the brains of the family, which was more than can be said for her son Mace Tyrell. To Queen Arianne Stark. "King Rob may not look favorably on us for not choosing a side in this war now that my granddaughter is a widow. But now, I tell you that we shall join the war. By the time that you read this, my son, Randyll Tarly, Baelor Hightower and Paxter Redwyne are sailing the fleets of Old Town and the Arbor to confront the Iron Fleet at Pike in a surprise attack to burn it all. Once it has been done, the Tyrell army of 30,000 will arrive in Seaguard, led by my son, my grandsons Garlan and Loras, Baelor Hightower and Randyll Tarly. I shall soon arrive in Riverrun to discuss matters with you and with his grace. One such matter is arranging a marriage between my granddaughter and a worthy bannerman of King Rob. I look forward to meeting the future king and queen in Riverrun. Olenna Tyrell." Soon after reading this, Arianne wrote a letter to Rob to inform him of what the Tyrells had decided to do. She met with her cousins, Catelyn, Ellaria, Sansa, Arya and Roslyn in Lord Tully's solar. Now the war will truly end. For the Tyrells sail their navy to Pike to burn the Iron Fleet before they can set sail, Arianne explained. "Will the Tyrells send an army to join Rob's?" asked Arya. "Yes, as soon as the Iron Fleet burns. And the Lady Olenna has said that she will be arriving soon in Riverrun." Sure enough, 4 days after the arrival of the letter from Highgarden, they had heard news from Lord Jason Mallister at Seaguard that the Iron Fleet was burning in Pike and that Tyrell ships were sailing for Seaguard. "I thought that Mace Tyrell wanted Margaery Tyrell to become queen," said Sansa when she and Arianne were sitting in her and Harold's bedchambers. "After they found out about the victory of Duskendale, they must have thought that it would have been stupid to fight Rob on Tywin Lannister's behalf. Though Mace Tyrell is famously stupid, he isn't stupid enough to try and gain the favor of Tywin Lannister when Tywin is surrounded on all sides by enemies and that a battle-hardened army of less than 80,000 are marching victoriously into the Riverlands after winning a battle against the largest army ever set foot inside Westeros," said Arianne. Arianne, Catelyn, Sansa and Roslyn Free welcomed a Tyrell entourage that arrived at the gates of Riverrun. The entourage was of 50 knights and a large carriage, painted green, with golden rose imagery and idols inlaid on the carriage. They rode into the courtyard, where Arianne stood to welcome the infamous Queen of Thorns. The first to climb out was indeed an old woman, but one who commanded the attention of all around her, with a fierce and unrelenting gaze as she looked around, as though her eyes could pierce, not into one's soul, but into one's mind. And the next to climb out of the carriage was a very pretty young woman, younger than Arianne, but older than Sansa. She had beautiful doe-like eyes, a kind and gentle smile and long and beautiful light brown hair, reminding Arianne of the days when she saw Loras Tyrell in King's Landing. "Ah, you must be Margaery. I do hope that my cousins don't try and take you to bed. Our two families don't have good relations and I don't mean to add to them." "Your Grace," said Margaery, curtsying to Arianne. "Welcome to Riverrun, Lady Margaery," said Arianne. "It must be strange for you to call someone else Your Grace when you were called the same when you were married to Renly. Are you still a maiden? Did you go to his bed a maiden and have been that ever since, in spite of 6 moons of marriage?" "Your Grace." "Lady Roslyn," said Olenna, bowing and kissing Arianne's hand and then greeting Roslyn. "Lady Olenna." "Lady Margaery." "Dear guests, please, Be welcome here in the home of my husband and my good father, Rosalind said politely. Sansa, she noticed, looked very excited to meet the Rose of Highgarden. The two began chatting away as they greeted each other. Lady Olenna. When you are refreshed and rested, we can talk in Lord Hoster's solar. Arianne offered. Where is Lord Hoster? Still ill? Olenna asked. He is, I'm afraid, she replied. Home. I'd rather get this done now. I may be old, but I'm not weak, she said. Indeed, you are anything but weak, Arianne thought as she welcomed the two Tyrell women inside the keep. Arianne and Olenna walked to the solar. So, what is it that House Tyrell wants in return for joining in the war? Arianne asked. I shall be honest with you, Your Grace. When I first heard of your marriage, I thought that you would stray from your bed with your husband. But I'm impressed, you haven't strayed once, if all the rumors are true and my spies aren't lazy drunks, long before you even had come to the Riverlands, she said. I will never ever be with any man or woman. The only person I'm sharing my bed with is Robb. Lady Olenna, people all thought the same as you, that I would be with all manners of men and women for the rest of my life like my Uncle Oberyn. Even my own father, both of my brothers and all of my cousins thought that. But the first person to see differently was the man who is now my husband, she said. Yes, I can see that. I look forward to meeting the king who melted a Dornish woman's heart more than the sun ever could. But, as you asked, what is House Tyrell's price? Again, I shall be honest. My idiot son had some stupid scheme to try and implicate that you had been unfaithful to your husband and to offer Margaery as a bride once the two of you were divorced, said Olenna. Your fucking idiot son. If he tries to stand between me and Robb and tell such horrible fucking lies, I will waste no time in sending him to the Dreadfort as Domeric Bolton's guest and give him my full permission to do whatever he likes to Mace Tyrell, and then I'll send him to Sunspear and let Uncle Oberyn finish him off in his laboratory. Olenna saw Arianne's reactions as she gripped the armrests of her chair and her face briefly twist in a fury. I told him what you are thinking. That he is an oafish moron. I'm at least glad that my grandson Willers and my granddaughter Margaery are not idiots. So, to seal this new alliance, I think some marriages are in order. Don't you? Arianne calmed down and took a deep breath. I remember my good brother Harold telling me when your son offered the hand of his niece Eleanor to Harold. Is the Lady Eleanor still unmarried? She asked. She is, yes, said Olenna. My brother, Quentyn, the future Prince of Sunspear, is unmarried. I can send a letter to my father to make the arrangements, she replied. Olenna nodded with approval and said, my eldest grandson, Willers, the heir to Highgarden, is unmarried, also. Whom would you suggest? Well, unfortunately, there are very few candidates for such a marriage from any great house, if any, said Arianne. Doesn't the king have a younger sister, Arya? She asked. Arianne managed to stop herself from laughing and said, unfortunately, Princess Arya is more interested in fighting rather than being a lady. She would make a bad husband for your grandson and wouldn't be suited to being Lady of Highgarden, I fear. As would either of my cousins. I think it is abundantly clear that the heir to Highgarden will not marry a bastard, even from House Martell, said Olenna fiercely. But, what about Margaery? I can think of the perfect husband for her. Though she won't be queen as you or your son might have hoped, she would be married to a man whom Robb could make a powerful lord, and they are dear friends, often calling each other brothers. So, any children that he and Margaery have could be married to mine when they are old enough, Arianne suggested. Olenna looked intrigued and asked, whom do you mean? His name is Sir Gendry Baratheon, known as the Stormhammer. Your grandson Loras has good reason to know who he is, if you don't, my lady, she said. He may be a legitimized bastard, but he has a strong claim to Storm's End and the Stormlands, and it's either him or Theon Greyjoy that Margaery can marry, and we both know which is preferable. Chapter 36, Chapter 34. Chapter Text. Harold 13. They started to march back to Riverrun soon after the victory of Duskendale. It was 3 days after the battle that they began the march. They were bringing back with them weapons, armor, horses, gold, silver, and a firm belief in victory and that the war would soon be over. The last raven from Sansa said that she is in Riverrun now. When the war is over, I'll finally be able to spend the rest of my life with her and with our family. There's nothing more I could want than this. Just to be with Sansa and to be her husband and father to our children. And to be back in the mountains, riding in the hills and swimming in the rivers. I miss the vale and the cool summer winds. And I never ever want to be on Rob's small council when he does become king. During the Battle of Duskendale, when he led the Knights of the Vale to charge at the archers, his life had been saved when the Golden Company's commander, Sir Harry Strickland, tried to kill him with a spear. Michael Redfort, Harold's squire, saved him by cutting his spear in half, and then he stabbed Strickland in the heart. Soon after the battle, Harold had knighted Michael. And, remembering a promise he made to him, shortly after knighting him, Harold said, "Sir Michael, a long time ago, before the war began, I told you that if you served me well, I would guarantee that you could marry Maya Stone. And so, for saving my life, I shall grant you your wish." Michael's usually introverted demeanor brightened at the mention of marrying Maya. "My lord, can you let us marry?" he asked. "I will. I will talk with your lord father and make sure that he accepts," he said, patting him on the shoulder. And so, he talked with Lord Horton Redfort and ensured that he would allow his son to marry her. "And I would offer him a position amongst the Knights of the Vale and lands and a castle in the Vale. Seeing as the Baelish family is extinct, I think that their old castle in the Fingers could do with a new lord," Harold offered, keen to not estrange one of his most powerful vassals. He accepted in the end, and Michael formed a new house calling itself House Glenfort. Whilst camping on the journey to Riverrun, Harold saw Gendry reading a letter by a fire next to his tent, whilst his squire Mairen was heating a bowl of stew over the fire. "Is that from Shireen?" he asked before sitting down next to him. "It is. She says that she is friends with Arya Stark and that the Tyrells have been visiting Riverrun," he replied, looking up from his letter. "Ah, the Tyrells. Have you heard of their most recent victory?" "Yeah, they burned the Iron Fleet at Pike," said Gendry. "Yes. They only did it after they heard of the Battle of Duskendale, presumably to be on the winning side," said Harold. "Do you know what the words of the Tyrells are?" "No, I don't. I only know the ones of Arryn, Baratheon and Stark," said Gendry. "Their words are growing strong. It may sound silly, but what they want is to have influences in all of the 7 kingdoms, like planting a rose garden. Eventually roses grow everywhere in that garden," Harold said. "Doesn't sound dissimilar to other houses," said Gendry. "No, it doesn't. Except, unlike the weasel-faced phrase, the Tyrells have beautiful women and handsome men and the gold and the respect that ambitious lords like the phrase can only have wet dreams about. And Lord Mace Tyrell had big dreams of his daughter, the prized Rose of Highgarden, becoming the queen, simply because the Tyrells were stewards before Aegon the Conqueror invaded and destroyed the royal family of the Reach. And never was there a Tyrell who was a king or any connection to royalty. But I guess now Mace Tyrell has realized that it would be better for their house to still exist rather than being destroyed if they backed Tywin Lannister, which might have happened if they hadn't joined us," said Harold. "Have you met Mace Tyrell?" asked Gendry. "No, though I do remember that letter he sent to me offering his niece Eleanor as a bride for me, and I remember his reply, in which he referred to Sansa as a northern savage. He also called Robb a savage, just by calling Sansa that, he replied. Will you remind Robb of that so that he can ask of that to Mace Tyrell?" Gendry asked with a grin before they chuckled. Harold said, that would be funny. Though it's not surprising, for Mace Tyrell is famously an idiot. All the clever decisions in their family come from his lady mother, Lady Olenna Tyrell. They call her the Queen of Thorns. The Queen of Thorns? Why? Asked Gendry as Mairen finished his cooking and offered a bowl to Harold and Gendry. Damn, Gendry is lucky to have a squire who cooks well, Harold thought as he sipped some. Because by all accounts she is a fearsome and prickly old woman. She is very clever and very cunning. And she is unafraid of telling others her opinions of them or of other people. She may appear to be a gentle and frail old woman, but she is very dangerous, Harold explained. Well, she may not like me then for how I battered her pretty grandson Loras in King's Landing, said Gendry. Ah, it was a melee. And you probably hammered some sense into him, said Harold. With the Iron Fleet burned, what will that mean for the war with the Greyjoys? Gendry asked. Well, once Robb and Arianne are crowned king and queen in King's Landing, we will turn our attention to them. Because their prized and great fleet is nothing but wreckage, that means that they will be far easier to invade and put a final stop to their rebellion, and then Theon will be made lord of the Iron Islands. The Ironborn strength is in their ships. Without them, they are easy prey, Harold explained. Can't they build another fleet? Gendry asked. It would take a long time to rebuild it to its former strength. And by the time that we take King's Landing and sail for the Iron Islands, they'd have only a dozen or so ships, replied Harold. They arrived in Riverrun, and soon after arriving in the courtyard, Harold saw Sansa. Her belly was larger than the last time he had seen her. Our child, only a few moons now, he thought with excitement as he climbed down from Stormwing and round to Sansa. He hugged her and kissed her several times. It's so good to see you back here. Are you well? He asked with concern after kissing her on the forehead. I'm fine, don't worry, Harry, she said with a smile, and then they kissed. Have the Maesters said when you will give birth? He asked as he held her hands. 2 moons, maybe 3, she said before placing his hand on her belly. He could feel movement inside. It moved. I felt our baby move. A little warrior in there, he said with pride. Maybe it's a boy who'll be a great knight like his father, said Sansa. Or perhaps it's a girl who'll be a cunning fighter like her Aunt Arya, he suggested, at which they chuckled and walked inside together. So, how has it been with the Tyrells here? He asked. It's been interesting. I've always wanted to meet Margaery Tyrell. Though I don't know why she accompanied Olenna Tyrell here, she explained. Probably for marriage alliances to keep good relations with Robb for entering the war on our side late, he replied. Who would Margaery Tyrell marry? Sansa asked. I don't know. But whomever she marries, will be a damn lucky man, if he's not like her late husband, said Harold. Why? What was wrong with Renly? She asked in confusion. Well, Renly was not interested in women. Ironically, he was more interested in Margaery's brother Loras rather than Margaery, Harold explained. How do you know? She asked. From my time in King's Landing. You would be able to see them meet and could tell by the way that they looked each other that they were in love, he said. Catelyn 13. And now, we can march on King's Landing and this war will finally be over and I can return home to be with my family, Catelyn thought as she saw Robb, Harold, Ed Muir, Uncle Brynden, Prince Oberyn and their bannermen ride into the courtyard. Arya and Arianne were standing by her side whilst Sansa stood to greet both her husband and her brother. Robb climbed off his horse and greeted Arianne first, showering her with kisses before turning to Arya, Sansa and to Catelyn. It's almost over, Catelyn whispered as she hugged her son. Aye, it is. Is all well here? He asked. It is. Though the Tyrells are here, she said as they broke from the hug. All of them? He asked. Just Margaery Tyrell and her grandmother. Mace Tyrell and his army are 3 days' march from here, she explained. I'll meet them in Grandfather Hoster's Solar as soon as I've dressed out of my armor, Robb replied. And greeted your queen properly. Arianne whispered seductively as she put her arms around Robb and kissed his neck a few times. Do these two not have any shame in doing this in front of their subjects and their bannermen? Catelyn walked with Harold, Sansa, Ed Muir, Roslyn, Uncle Brynden and Prince Oberyn to her Lord Father's Solar. Please don't take too long in getting out of your armor, Robb. Not when there are important guests here. She was relieved when the two arrived in the Solar, and soon after, were followed by Lady Margaery and Lady Olenna. Robb and Arianne faced them. Your Grace, the two Tyrell ladies said, curtsying to Robb. Lady Margaery. Lady Olenna. I apologize that I couldn't have been here when you had first arrived here, Robb said as he walked towards them and kissed their hands. All sat down as Margaery said, it's quite all right, Your Grace. Lady Roslyn and her Grace have made us feel very welcome here. Now, shall we move on to business, said Lady Olenna. A truly prickly Queen of Thorns indeed. Prince Oberyn raised his eyebrows with fascination at her. Catelyn's Uncle Brynden looked impressed and as if he liked her. Of course, Lady Olenna. Now, Arianne told me that you have expressed interest in a few marriage alliances, but that nothing has been set yet. Am I correct so far? You are, Your Grace. Her Grace did indeed make some interesting suggestions. One being that my granddaughter, Lady Eleanor Tyrell, marry your good brother, Prince Quentyn of Dorne, said Lady Olenna. How old is the Lady Eleanor, Lady Olenna? Asked Prince Oberyn. She is 6 and 10 years old, Prince Oberyn. She is a pretty young girl and excited at the thought of getting married, said Lady Margaery. And you would allow her to marry a Dornish prince? My nephew. Prince Oberyn asked, as though he was surprised that they would marry into his family. What happened to my eldest grandson was my Moran son's own fault for forcing him into tourneys he wasn't ready for. Willers tells me that you get along well, Prince Oberyn. We do, my lady. How is he? Said Prince Oberyn. He is well, but still unmarried, which is a bore, frankly. Especially when he is older than Queen Arianne. So, Lord Willers is unmarried. I'm afraid that I cannot think of anyone suitable to be the future Lady of Highgarden, unless he marries, Edmure was about to say. Lord Edmure, my grandson will not marry a bastard of Prince Oberyn, said the ever-fierce Queen of Thorns. Uncle Brynden and Prince Oberyn look as though they are trying very hard not to laugh. Caitlin noticed as Edmure nodded in apology and sat straight as his face reddened. I may just have to defend the honor of my daughters for that slight, Queen of Thorns, said Prince Oberyn with a forthcoming grin. Oh, are you claiming that your daughters have some honor, dignity or even decency in the first place, Red Viper? Asked Lady Olenna, at which Prince Oberyn burst out laughing. It was then that Caitlin noticed how Harold started whispering to Robb. They whispered for a few moments before Robb gestured for Harold to speak. Lady Olenna, I may have a compromise to suggest in regards to Lord Willers. If I may. By all means, Harold Arryn, she said. I know of a woman from the Vale, whom is of very noble background. She is Lady Myranda Royce, daughter of Lord Nestor Royce of the Bloody Gate, and an old friend of mine from childhood. Though she has been a widow for a few years now, she would make a suitable husband to Lord Willers, he said. I'll talk with Lord Nestor after this discussion. If that was it. Lady Olenna replied. I do have one more suggestion to make. In regards to the future of Storm's End, Lady Shireen, daughter of Stannis Baratheon, has made it clear that she doesn't want to be Lady of Storm's End and is perfectly content and happy with being Lady of her girlhood home of Dragonstone. And that leaves Sir Gendry Baratheon a perfect candidate to being Lord of Storm's End, and he is unmarried, said Robb. Yes, Queen Arianne mentioned him. But I would meet him personally first, said Lady Olenna. A bastard of Robert Baratheon becoming the Lord of Storm's End and Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. He may experience tension from the Stormlords if this does become a reality. So, is it settled then? Do we have an agreement? Robb asked. We do. I'll tell my oafish son and ensure that all is agreed upon. I will meet Lord Royce and then Sir Gendry, said Lady Olenna. Caitlin walked outside and saw Robb and Harold talk. So, Myranda Royce, Robb said with a cheeky grin. What? Willers Tyrell will be glad to be married to her. He'd thank me for it, so long as he doesn't die like her last husband did, he said before the two giggled immaturely. So, who will tell Gendry that he will be Lord of Storm's End and Shireen will be Lady of Dragonstone? Harold asked. I will. I will be king, and it's time that I acted like one, off of the battlefield, he replied. Don't you act like a king does in bed with your queen? Or does she give all of the commands? Harold joked before Robb playfully punched his shoulder. What is there to know about Myranda Royce? Caitlin asked, suspicious as to why her son and Goodson were laughing. Well, Lady Stark, Myranda is an old friend. When I was squire to Lord Yohn Royce, I met her on several occasions. She is a very beautiful woman and should definitely have no problem with bearing children for the future Lord of Highgarden. However, she does have a slight reputation, in court anyways, not a reputation that is public knowledge, Harold admitted. What sort of reputation? She asked suspiciously. The sort of reputation that my wife had before we married, Robb replied. She too has a licentious reputation, does she? She's a good and kind woman, though her first husband, an old man, died on their wedding night in the bedding. His heart was quite fragile, and he was quite unprepared for how seriously she takes things in bed, said Harold, who looked like Uncle Brynden earlier when he was trying not to laugh. Gendry 13. Gendry was talking with Shireen and asking her stories about her childhood. He was glad that she could remember the more pleasant memories of her childhood before the Red Priestess Melisandre arrived in Dragonstone. Sir Davos would take father and I sailing around Dragonstone and see all of the great castle from the water. The septs used to look so beautiful from the water, as did the staircases leading up to the castle, she said. And Shireen was always interested in hearing Gendry's stories. He chose not to tell her the stories of the battles he had fought in, and so he decided to tell her the stories of when he was a squire of Harold and the two tourneys he had competed in. And then, Thoros of Myr pointed behind me. I turned around, and there was Loras Tyrell, charging at me, just after I had thought that I had defeated him and put him down. He smashed my helmet with his shield and I took my helmet off and used it as a shield. The hit he dealt onto me with his shield gave me this scar, he said, pointing at a small scar on his forehead. I then smashed my hammer into his chest and then onto his shoulder, which not even the brave and legendary Knight of Flowers could withstand, he finished. What happened then? She asked, on the edge of her chair. Then I looked down on him and shouted this time, stay down, you pretty-haired princess, before I faced Thoros of Myr again, he replied. She heartily giggled and it was then that she looked up to see someone behind Gendry. Gendry turned around to see Robb and Sir Davos. I apologize for interrupting, but I would like to talk with you both, said Robb. He and Davos sat down and he asked Shireen, my lady, Sir Davos and Sir Gendry say that you would much prefer to be the Lady of Dragonstone rather than be the Lady of Storm's End, as is your birthright. Is that all true? It is, your grace. I love Dragonstone and would like to continue living there once this is all over and make it my home and rebuild the septs there, she said sweetly. Of course, my lady. So, you would have no objection for your cousin here to become Lord of Storm's End? What? Me, the Lord of Storm's End? But, I'm a bastard. I don't deserve Storm's End. Robb, I don't deserve Storm's End, Gendry said. Gendry, you're not a bastard anymore. You are a true Baratheon, like your father and your Storm Lord and Storm King ancestors. You are entitled to Storm's End and you have a rightful claim to it. And don't forget that the first Baratheon to be Lord of Storm's End was the bastard brother of Aegon the Conqueror, Davos said before turning to Shireen and asking. Do you think that Gendry should be Lord of Storm's End? Yes, I do, Sir Davos. He is a very good man and would be a very good lord, she replied sweetly. I don't know the first thing about leadership or how to be a good lord. Jon Arryn never taught me any of those things, said Gendry. Sir Davos would gladly spend time to help you grow into the role, said Robb. Davos nodded and said, I owe everything I have and my sons have to the noble house of Baratheon. I would be more than glad to help both you and to Lady Shireen. Gendry thought about this. But what about the Storm Lords? Will they accept me as their liege lord? He asked. They will. You are a legitimized Baratheon, you are a brave knight, you are known the world over as the Stormhammer, but also, they will accept you and support you when they learn of your marriage into House Tyrell, said Robb. What? I'm going to marry a Tyrell. Who? That's for the Queen of Thorns to decide, said Robb. Where is she? He asked. In my grandfather's solar, waiting to meet you, Robb replied. Gendry stood up and said goodbye, Shireen, before nodding to Robb and then to Sir Davos. By the 7, I'll be named Lord of Storm's End. A few years ago, I was still a blacksmith's apprentice for Toib Homart in King's Landing. He walked to the solar, where he could see Lord Nestor Royce leaving the solar. My lord, he said, bowing his head. Sir Gendry, he replied, nodding at him, with a wide grin on his face. He looks happy. Very happy. As though he has just achieved something. What is it? He knocked on the door. Who is it? Said a gentle and elderly voice. I am Sir Gendry Baratheon, my lady, he said. Enter, she said. Gendry walked inside and saw her sitting down on Lord Hoster's chair. He bowed to her and said, my lady. Look at me, she said. He did so and she nodded and said, you look a lot like your father. I remember seeing him at the tourney of Harrenhal, back when he was your age. Thank you, my lady, he said. But you are a bastard, legitimized perhaps, but even then, that makes me wonder. Will you be like your father and abandon your wife's bed in favor of women like he had done to your own mother? Never, my lady. I was taught about honor from Lord Jon Arryn, Lord Harold Arryn and his grace, King Robb, and it is something that will always be a part of me, he replied. Sit down, she told him. He did as he was bid and she said, tell me your story. He told her his story, from when he first met Jon Arryn, to when he found out who his father was, to when he was knighted, to when he won the melee tourney in King's Landing before finishing at when he joined Harold and Robb at the Bloody Gate and fought at the Battle of the Green Fork. Quite the story, Sir Gendry. So, His Grace tells me that he has plans to make you the Lord of Storm's End. Is that what you want? She asked. I would consider it an honor to be the Lord of Storm's End, my lady. Though it is a duty that I feel very unprepared for. I would gladly do what is expected of me as a lord, he replied. And would you always listen to your wife, as an advisor and one whom you can trust? I would, my lady. I would never belittle or denigrate any woman, for I have met many women who exceed expectations of lesser men and prove themselves smarter than most men I've had the misfortune of coming across, he replied. She hummed at that and asked, so, would you agree to marrying a lady of House Tyrell? I would, my lady. If she would be willing to marry me and be happy at Storm's End, I would consider myself a very fortunate man indeed, he replied. She said. He was sweating. Harold was right. She is fearsome. Her very gaze is unnerving me. I think that before any betrothal can take place, you should first meet your betrothed and see if you would be a good match for her, she said. Dear. You can come in now, she called to the door. The door opened and Gendry turned around to see Margaery Tyrell. What the fuck? They are thinking of marrying me off to the Rose of Highgarden. Uncle Renly's widow. Is this a dream? Gendry took a few deep breaths and stood up and could hear his own heart beating as he bowed and said, my lady. Sir Gendry, she said with a kind and gentle smile and a sweet voice. Seven help me, I think I'm in love with her already. I'll leave you two alone for a moment, said Olenna Tyrell, and she stood up and walked to the door. Margaery sat next to Gendry, and after Lady Olenna closed the door behind her, he said, I hope that your brother Loras won't be too upset if he saw us here, my lady. Why would he? She asked. I don't think he likes me, my lady, after I beat him at the Militoni in King's Landing, he replied honestly. I'm sure that he would be impressed by the stories of your bravery on the battlefield. And that you're a good man. Earlier, I saw you with your cousin, Lady Shireen, she said. She's the sweetest girl in the world. I love her dearly, he admitted. Well, now you see how protective my brothers would be around me, she replied. Time to be brave. My lady, I don't want to think badly of me when I ask you this question, but I feel like I should be honest about this. What is it? She asked. Do you see yourself in a future with me, as Lady of Storm's End? He asked. She thought about this for a moment and then asked, well, what would you say if I did say yes? I would say that, I know I'm not king of the Seven Kingdoms, nor am I the most handsome man in the world, and I'm not the wealthiest man in the kingdoms also. But if we did marry, I know that I would love you and always do what I can to make you happy and make any children that we have happy, he said, shyly, whilst sweating a little. Gods, I don't recall being this nervous since my first day as Harold's squire. Margaery looked down at her feet for a moment and then looked back at Gendry with a gentle smile. I appreciate your honesty, Gendry. And, in answer to your earlier question, I can say yes. I would be able to see myself as Lady of Storm's End and as your wife, only if you call me Margaery, she said before holding his hand. Gods, I can hear my heart beating really fast again. But, pardon, Margaery, are you sure? I know that your Lord Father wanted you to be queen, he said. Yes, he did. And for a time, so did I, she admitted with a smile before her smile turned into a slight frown. But after your uncle Renly was murdered by his own brother and I heard the stories about Joffrey and Cersei, it's made me realize that I don't really wish to be queen. I just want to be happy, she explained. I'd do anything to make you happy, Gendry thought as he nodded and smiled at her. Chapter 37, Chapter 35. Chapter Text. Robb 13. Mace Tyrell, Randyll Tarly, Mathis Rowan, Baelor Hightower and Paxter Redwyne were at the head of the Reach army of 30,000 soldiers and knights. When Robb had first heard the news of the sinking of the Iron Fleet, it was a few days after the Battle of Duskendale and preparations were being made for the return to Riverrun. He heard of the attack from a raven sent by Orianne. He told his war council the news in Robb's tent whilst on the march back to Riverrun. Does this change anything for the war, your grace? Asked Harmon Euler. No. But, with such a devastating attack on the Greyjoys, thereby crippling their chances of invading anywhere for the next few years, Mace Tyrell will most assuredly have demands in exchange for a gift such as the sinking of the Iron Fleet. Many lords groaned in reply at this. Though it is a good thing that they have dealt such a blow to the Iron Pirates, we must not forget that they only decided to do this after our victory at Duskendale. This is just a desperate throw of the dice to be on the victor's side of this war, like when the Lannisters sacked King's Landing after the Battle of the Trident, said Rickard Carstock, at which all voiced their agreement. Ah, they'll probably make songs about how brave they were in destroying the Iron Fleet in a surprise attack and as their crews slept, and Mace Tyrell will claim it as another victory of his, said Bronze Yohn Royce. What if this is a ruse to lower our guard and attack Riverrun with us all here and for the rest of the entire Reach army to march on the Riverlands as we rush to get to Riverrun and then Tywin Lannister flanking us? Uncle Ed Muir suggested. Lords either agreed or disagreed with Uncle Ed Muir's point. Lord Tully, I would think that that could be possible, if it were a man such as Tywin Lannister. However, this is Mace Tyrell that we are talking about. So, we need not fear for such a thing, for we all know him to be a man who is not famous for having any cunning, Robb pointed out. The only thing he's famous for is for eating most of the Reach's food, singing like a drunk eunuch, and for not standing up to his prickly mother, bellowed the great Jon Umber, at which the whole tent roared with laughter, especially from the Dornish. Arianne had sent him an additional raven, with a letter saying of Olenna Tyrell's interest in a few marriage alliances. They had already settled on the idea of Mace Tyrell's niece, Lady Eleanor Tyrell, marrying Quentyn Martell. Though she was adamant that a suitable bride be found for marrying Willers Tyrell, heir to Highgarden. Soon after returning to Riverrun, Robb spent the night with Arianne in her arms. Soon this will all be over and we will be living happily in King's Landing, Arianne said as she kissed his bearded cheek. And our child will be born, Robb said, kissing her on the lips. Yes. Maester Vimen said that it should be another moon and our first child will be born, she said, taking his hand and putting it on her body. Can you feel our little warrior? She asked. Yes, I can, he said, beaming as he kissed her on her head. 2 days after he and the army returned from Duskendale, Robb greeted the Tyrell army and its commanders. He stood with his mother, Arianne, Harold, Sansa, Ed Muir, Roslin, Uncle Brynden, Oberyn, Ellaria, Gendry, Shireen and Sir Davos Seaworth. He was glad that soon after his proclamation to the Stormlords, that they had willingly accepted Gendry as their liege lord. And he was glad that both Margaery and Olenna Tyrell had agreed for Margaery to marry Gendry. Mace Tyrell was an overweight man who rode a large horse. He wasn't as large as the likes of Lord Wyman Mardaily of White Harbour, or even King Robert Baratheon, but he was large and wore armor that didn't look at all like it had seen any battle or had borne the brunt of a sword, a spear, an axe or an arrow. Despite being repaired several times by Lord Hoster's blacksmith, Herdon Rivers, many dents and scars were etched on Robb's armor from all manners of weapons in the 4 great battles that he had personally fought in. A servant placed a crate below Lord Tyrell and he climbed off his horse and stepped onto the crate and then onto the ground. Robb stood next to Uncle Ed Muir and Aunt Roslin, holding Arianne's hand, and wearing his full plate armor, with a grey direwolf etched onto the plate. Lord Tyrell, on behalf of my Lord Father and my house, Lady Roslin and I gladly welcome you and your companions to Riverrun, said Uncle Ed Muir as he and Aunt Roslin stepped forth to greet the Lord of Highgarden. Thank you very much for such a kind welcome, Lord Ed Muir, said Mace Tyrell as he shook hands joyfully with Uncle Ed Muir and kissed Aunt Roslin's hand before he was introduced to Robb and Arianne. Your Grace, this is an honor, said the Lord of Highgarden, bowing his head, and facing him with a jolly smile. My Lord Tyrell. I think we can agree that these are far more pleasant circumstances than the last time we met, said Robb as they shook hands. Indeed, Your Grace. And, as I'm sure you are aware, the Iron Fleet is nothing but half-destroyed planks of wood on the coast of Pike, he said proudly, as though he was the sole victor of the battle and not Randall Tully, Baelor Hightower or Paxter Redwyne. This is a man who is infamous for claiming victories that are not his own. He claims that he won the Battle of Ashford in Robert's rebellion against Robert himself, though it was Randall Tully's victory and Mace Tyrell had appeared at the last minute. And rather than attack, he starved Storm's End and Stannis 500 men for a whole year before being told of the destruction of the Targaryen dynasty by my Lord Father. A victory that my king and I will always hold the deepest of gratitude to you, to the noble house of Tyrell and to all brave men of the Reach, Lord Tyrell, Arianne said cleverly. I remember what she said about his plans to try and frame her for adultery and offer Margaery as an alternative bride. For that, I can never forgive you, Mace Tyrell. He smiled politely but also greedily at Arianne for her statement, as though he was eager for a grand reward he thought he deserved for his bravery. What does he hope to get from me? To be named Hand of the King. Edmure hosted a great feast at Riverrun to welcome the lords and ladies of the Reach. As Robb looked around the feast hall, he told Arianne, all we need now are lords and ladies from the Crown Lands, the Westerlands and the Iron Islands, and it'll be the first time in history that nobles from all kingdoms of Westeros were in the same hall, feasting and drinking. Maybe we should do that, when we're in King's Landing, said Arianne. We have to take it first and end this war for good, said Robb. Well, if anyone can do it, it will be you, my handsome young wolf, she said before kissing him. Old gods, why do I always feel so happy when she calls me that? Halfway during the feast, Robb sent Oliver to escort Mace Tyrell to host a Tully's Solar as Robb, Arianne, Gendry, Oberyn, Harold, Edmure, Margaery and Olenna Tyrell began making their way there. Robb and Arianne sat down, having arrived first, followed by Harold, Edmure, Gendry, Oberyn. Mace Tyrell was the last to arrive. Thank you, Oliver, said Robb. Your Grace. His squire bowed his head loyally and took his leave and closed the door. Mace Tyrell looked proud, as though he felt important for joining them in the Solar. Lord Tyrell, in your absence, Lady Olenna, His Grace and I began planning marriage alliances between our houses. And now we have agreed on 3 possible marriages. But of course, we couldn't finalize all of this without your presence in the negotiations, Arianne said politely, feeding his ego. This isn't finalizing anything. All it will take is a sharp word from his mother, and he would agree to anything. He nodded pompously as he sat down and said, very good, Your Grace. And what marriages are these? For Eleanor to be wed to Prince Quentyn Martell, the future Prince of Dorne, Olenna began, to which her son nodded as though this was a good match. Myrandar of the House Royce to be wed to Willers, continued Olenna. What? Who is she? He asked. Myrandar Royce is a good and fair woman and Lady of the Vale, Lord Tyrell, surely a worthy wife to your eldest son, and one day, under proper guidance, could be an excellent and wise Lady of Highgarden, Harold said eloquently. He slowly nodded at the words of proper guidance, and Harold continued, as I'm sure you're aware, Lord Tyrell, the noble house of Royce has history going back 10,000 years as kings of the Kingdom of the Vale and of the Kingdom of Bronze. Hearing a brief on the history of the House of Royce did calm him down, and he nodded with approval. Well done, Harold, Robb thought as he gave a quick wink to Harold. He winked back. And the third? For Margaery to be wed to Sir Gendry Baratheon, the soon-to-be Lord of Storm's End and Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, Lady Olenna finished. What? He asked in surprise. Gendry sat up to seen by the Lord of Highgarden, whom was now wearing clothes befitting his status as the future Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. We've made the arrangements, Mace. Don't make things difficult, said Olenna with a stern voice, which seemed to make her son tremble. Father, it is better that we marry into the Baratheons of Storm's End, to spread House Tyrell's roots all over the 7 kingdoms, whispered Margaery, quietly, but Robb was able to hear. How many times does this need to happen that he must be persuaded that what his mother has helped establish is the right way forward? Your Grace, forgive me, but can a more suitable candidate be found for my daughter, rather than a bastard of House Baratheon? He asked. There are no suitable candidates. Unless you want your daughter to marry Theon and one day be Lady of the Iron Islands. Does he want me to take a second wife like a few of the Targaryens had done and many of my ancestors had done thousands of years ago? Does he want my assurances that his future granddaughter will marry my future son and heir? Is there no end to fucking greed of these Southerners? Lady Olenna looked angrily at her son, but then Robb stood up and said, Lord Tyrell, may I remind you that whilst you carried out a great act of heroism on behalf of a lasting peace for the realm and shortening possibly a devastating war that would affect all of Westeros, you were also late to join the war. Before he could make a reply, Robb added, and of course, though I have forgiven it, I also would like to remind you of the occasion when, as Renly Baratheon's good father, you drew a sword at me during a peaceful negotiation at Maidenpool. And before the war, in a reply to Lord Harold Arryn telling you of his betrothal to my sister, you referred to my sister as a northern savage. In doing so, you called my family, myself and all my fellow northerners savages. He noticed Olenna's eyes roll at her son's stupidity. The whole room's attention was on Mace Tyrell and how his proud expression turned red with embarrassment, and he backed down. I do apologize, Your Grace. For I had never ever met a northerner back then, and I foolishly believed all of the silly stories about northerners. I do beg for your forgiveness and can assure that I do not think so terribly of the people of the North or of the noble house of Stark, he said sheepishly. That's quite all right, my lord, Robb said. If you hadn't met any Northerners, whom did you surrender to in Robert's rebellion if not father? Bootlicking Southerners. The Tyrells left the Solar, and as the door shut, Robb could hear Olenna say to her son, you see, this is why I handle these sorts of negotiations, not you, and especially not your wife. It's obvious I didn't beat you enough as a child. I'm glad that she is not my mother and that he is not my father, Gendry commented, at which the previously quiet Solar burst into laughter. Ah, but, Sir Gendry, he will be your good father, and if his daughter won't be queen, he will want his granddaughter, through you, to be queen, if not his granddaughter from Willers, Prince Oberyn pointed out with a hearty chuckle. So, now what is next, your grace? Asked Harold. The whole Solar turned to face Robb. Now, we go to King's Landing. Tyrion 13. The Old Lion of Casterly Rock had entered King's Landing a week before they had heard the news of the Battle of Duskendale. Tywin Lannister was greeted at the steps of the Red Keep by Joffrey, Tyrion, Cersei, the small council, the royal court and a now healed Jaime, though his handsome face was marred by several cuts on his forehead, from Stannis punching him with a steel plate and chainmail gauntlet. Lord Grandfather, welcome to King's Landing. Your presence signals a welcome return to peace and order across all of the Seven Kingdoms, said Joffrey. Tywin, wearing the full-set armor of the Lord of Casterly Rock with lion heads as shoulder pauldrons, stood unsmiling and unimpressed by the welcoming reception. Not surprising if he believes my report on the battle and how Joffrey hid with his mother in the throne room during the thick of the fighting. Tyrion walked towards his father, with the pin of the hand of the king in his hand, and offered it to his lord father. Tywin took the pin, pinned it to his suit of armor and finally said, thank you, your grace. In the next session of the small council, Davon had been moved to be master of ships with the death of Sir Jacelyn, Tyrion had been appointed master of coin and Uncle Kevan had been named master of laws. What are the movements of Robb Stark and his army? Tywin asked. My lord Hand, the remnants of Stannis' army joined with them and swore fealty to Robb Stark, and now they are marching towards Duskendale, said Varys, bringing Stark's army to over 80,000. All of whom are experienced and battle-hardened, Tyrion pointed out. If he tries to take the city, he could leave himself exposed for a surprise attack, Cersei pointed out. He's not trying to take Duskendale. He knows of the sellsword armies that we hired and that they will soon land on Duskendale's coastline. He means to confront them before we can join with them and outnumber them 2-1, or even 3-1 if the Tyrells do join us, said Tywin. How do you know? Asked Jaime. Because it's what I would do. If he crushes them, then we will have very little chance of survival, said the Hand of the King. But the sellsword army number over 100,000. There is no way that Robb Stark can defeat them, Cersei insisted. You underestimate him just as I had underestimated him. We can't underestimate him ever again. So, do we agree to Balon Greyjoy's terms for an alliance, my Lord Hand? By letting him have the North and his independence before we take the fight to them once the war is over? Davon asked. No. The Greyjoys have shown that they cannot be relied upon, given how the Northerners threw them out and had been prepared for an attack. No, we prepare the defenses of the city in case of a siege if Robb Stark defeats Sir Harry Strickland and his sellsword armies. With my army, we stand a better chance of outlasting any attack, said Tywin before turning to the Queen Regent. And if there is a siege, the king will not hide in the Red Keep. Tyrion smirked at seeing his sister tremble under their father's aggressive gaze before saying, yes, father. The Alchemists Guild has been working doubly hard to produce more wildfire in the event of another siege, my lord. And refugees conscripted into the garrison or as labor have been working hard to prepare siege defenses and repair damages made by Stannis, said Tyrion. Tywin nodded in approval. The Tyrells still have not replied to a marriage alliance offer between the king and Margaery Tyrell, my lord, said Pycelle, whom had been restored to his old position and was Tywin's most trustworthy and bootlicking servant on the small council. They are outweighing the possibilities of which side to join. They'll wait to hear the news of the outcome of the battle between Robb Stark and the sellsword armies, said Tywin. But when news had reached them of the Battle of Duskendale, the whole city was in a panic. Robb Stark had crushed the largest army in all of Westeros history, a larger army than Renly Baratheon had had when he was at the height of his power. Tyrion knew that when Robb Stark and his army had returned from resting at Riverrun, they would march on King's Landing. And so, he met with Bronn, whom had been knighted for his valor at the Battle of Blackwater Bay and had married Lady Lollys Stokeworth and was now Sir Bronn Blackwater and was the Lord of Stokeworth Castle, after Lolly's mother died of old age and Lolly's sister was banished after her husband was stupid enough to challenge Bronn to a duel. That didn't end well for him at all. So, with a massive and undefeated fucking army coming to attack, what is there left for us to do? Bronn asked as they walked around the Great September of Baelor. Think of a way for us to escape from this, unscathed, and with our names and our pride intact, said Tyrion. And how do you plan to do that? Bronn asked. By seeing if we can negotiate with Robb Stark and end this war, said Tyrion. With who as king? Your nephew. Or Robb Stark, asked Bronn. I want my family to be alive when this is all over, but at the same time, I want there to be peace. I thought that eventually Robb Stark would lose and be forced to bend the knee, but he's made no mistake and has proven himself a capable player of the game, unlike his father or his mentor. Though he is still honorable and merciful, which is amazing to behold for someone who has achieved this much and is younger than 20. So, what will your father do? If I were him, I would try to sue for peace or make some sort of offering, but I don't think he will, said Tyrion. At the next day's session at the small council, Joffrey was forced to attend, for the news of the Battle of Duskendale was too dire for him to not attend. Lord Hand, the fleets of the Arbor and Old Town have burned the Iron Fleet at Pike and now they sail for Seaguard, whilst my little birds discovered that Olenna Tyrell and Margaery Tyrell have arrived in Riverrun, to negotiate marriage alliances with Orlys Stark, said Varys. Joffrey looked nervous, Tyrion could see. He looked scared as his grandfather glared down at him. This must be the first time that Joffrey has attended a small council session. And already he's close to shitting himself before the hand of the king has even said anything. Well, Your Grace, have you any suggestions to make? No ways of saving this city and House Lannister from this debacle? Tyrion asked. Tywin glanced at his youngest son before turning to his face grandson again. Joffrey was insulted by Tyrion's question and looked to his grandfather for support. There was none. I am the king. I will not be talked to like that by you, imp, he shouted from across the room. And how long will you be king for, Your Grace? As soon as Robb Stark meets with the Tyrells, their army will join with his and they will march on King's Landing, said Tywin. We will crush them all and put their heads all over the gates of King's Landing for their treachery. Just like we did with Uncle Stannis. Joffrey said with a grin, as if to impress all around him. Only his mother smiled at him and patted him on the back. That doesn't tell us how we will win or how we will survive this, Your Grace. Is there any way that we can make peace? Jaime asked. No. The king, in his infinite wisdom, and with such wonderful counsel from his mother, decided against that when he had executed Ned Stark, the perfect hostage to make peace with Winterfell, Riverrun and the Eyrie. If Ned Stark wasn't executed, then he could have spent the rest of his life at the Wall and Robb Stark would stay in Winterfell, Harold Arryn in the Eyrie and the Tullys in Riverrun. But no, now they all are closing in on us, with Storm's End, Dragonstone, Sunspear and Highgarden alongside them. And all of my life's work in making House Lannister the most powerful in the world and a house for all to fear and respect has come trembling down, said Tywin, at which Cersei trembled under their father's gaze. I executed a traitor. He had to die so that all would fear us and that no lord should dare oppose us again. Joffrey insisted. And what has that done, but turn the whole realm against us, including Ned Stark's eldest son, who will march over 100,000 men to King's Landing? Yes, I'm sure that they fear us so much that they have marched all this way just to bend the knee and swear fealty to us. Tywin clearly had had enough of his grandson's antics and walked toward him and picked him up by both of his ears and dragged him to a far corner of the room and whispered only for him to hear, but Tyrion could hear it. You have endangered the Lannister name and the legacy of my family for too long. All for your pathetic vanity. You are nothing but a stupid bastard who has brought shame to my legacy. You are an insult. Tyrion's father whispered darkly. He finally let go of him and Joffrey walked back to his chair and sat back down again, scared of this confrontation, and he looked as though he was trying to hold back tears. His mother looked too scared to try and comfort her son. Robb Stark will accept no truce or peace. Not unless we offer some form of a compromise or some form of justice for his father, said Tyrion. No. He's going to come for King's Landing and to kill all Lannisters. If we hold out long enough and break his army and force him and his allies to swear fealty and return home, then that is the only way we can survive this, said Tywin. Then he turned to Tyrion and saying, organize all defenses of the city and prepare for all possible ways that he could attack. Tyrion nodded and he turned to Jaime and Davon, conscript as many you can to the garrison and gather all possible soldiers and knights from the Crown lands to come to King's Landing. This fight will determine the legacy of the Lannisters as the dominant power of Westeros. And it will not fail, not as long as we hold our own and push them back. For only by holding them off and forcing a peace out of them can we survive this. Arianne 13. Arianne, with her child growing for 9 moons now, lay down in bed with Robb after he announced his plans for marching on King's Landing to all the assembled lords and ladies. Can't you stay until our child is born? She asked. I'm sorry. I truly am. But you are safe here, he tried to say. I don't want to be safe without you. I want you here when I give birth, she said. He held her hands and said, I know. And I want to be here. But, for all of the kingdoms, this war must end. Not the next moon. Or the moon after that or next year. Now. And it can only end when King's Landing falls and the Lannisters' hold on power is broken. Will you send for us as soon as it's all over? She asked. I will. I swear it, he said before kissing her hands, then he kissed her head and finally her lips. I love you so much, Arianne. And I will end this war for us to raise our children together and for there to be peace, he said as he ran his hands through her hair. She kissed him hard as she said goodbye to him the next morning. I love you so much. But remember, that I don't want you to be a hero, I just want you to be my husband and for you to be with me and our family for the rest of our lives, she whispered. I'll come back, I will. I promise, he whispered back before kissing her again. He climbed onto his horse and Arianne watched as he rode out of the courtyard. Arya rode with him, for important work, Robb mysteriously told her as she saw her ride alongside her brother. Arianne felt tears swim down her face as she could no longer see Robb. Gods, old and new, end this war soon so that he can come back to me and we can be king and queen. I don't want to see him riding off to war and worry about him not coming back ever again. 5 days after Robb led the army from Riverrun, Arianne was with Catelyn, Sansa, Sarilla, Elia, Margaery, Daisy and Ellaria in the Godswood. Arianne looked around it, remembering when she and Robb married. She smiled at the memories. The talking all around her, she did not hear at all. Her back started hurting, in spite of sitting on a wooden bench with Sansa. She grimaced as she reached for her back. Ari, are you all right? Asked Sansa. All turned to her and she said, it's fine, it's just my back. Gods, I need to have a shit. If you'll excuse me, I need to go, she said. Whatever for? Asked Ellaria. A shit, she replied, before her back began hurting again. She noticed Catelyn and Ellaria exchange a worried glance. They both stood up and walked towards her. Daisy. Take her to Maester Vimen, now. Sarilla, go to him and make sure he is ready. Catelyn said. What? What's going on? Arianne asked, biting her lip as she could feel her back hurt again. You are about to give birth, said Ellaria. What? This is it. By the gods. Sarilla ran as fast as she could to Maester Vimen's solar when she had heard Ellaria's words. Daisy quickly stood up and held her by both arms. She screamed as she felt pain worse than what she had just experienced in her back. She cursed as her cousins helped her inside the keep. Mother! Where are you? Help me, please, she thought as she was taken to the solar, still screaming and cursing. Arianne cried as Daisy, far stronger than Robb, effortlessly lifted her up and gently placed her down on Maester Vimen's table. She screamed long and loud as she lay flat down. Mother, help me. Father, help me. Robb, help me. But her parents and her husband weren't there. It was just her good mother, her aunt and her good sister. Your Grace, you must be strong. It'll be over soon, you must first take some deep breaths for the child. You can do it, said Maester Vimen. She took some deep breaths, but then screamed again. Elaria lifted the hems of her dress back far enough as Maester Vimen looked down. Ariane screamed and screamed, for her parents to be there and for Rob to be there, but mostly for the pain to end. Will this fucking end? Your Grace, I can see the head. Keep pushing. You're almost there, said Maester Vimen as Daisy held both of her hands down. Ariane pushed, her energy was almost gone. I can't breathe. I can't do this. Just one more time, Ari, my love. You can do this, said Elaria. Ariane pushed with what little strength she had left. It was over. Ariane was panting as though she escaped from an airless chamber. Water, I need water. But then she heard crying. She looked up and saw a crying baby being held up by Maester Vimen. My baby. My baby. Daisy helped her sit up and Maester Vimen said, you have a handsome son, Your Grace. My son. He passed him to her. She held him in her arms, scared of holding him just a little too hard. She looked at her little son, who was crying still. My precious little boy. It's okay. It's okay. I'm here. I'm here, she whispered to her crying son before gently kissing him on his forehead. Ariane was helped down from the table and sat down on Maester Vimen's chair, with all looking at her and her son. Did you and Rob decide on a name? Elaria asked as she put a hand on her shoulder and then gently rubbed both of her shoulders. Yes, we decided on Serena if it was a daughter and Halric if it was a son. Yes. Halric, she said. Halric. A very good and northern name, said Sansa as she looked down on her beautiful nephew. Come, Ariane, let's get you to bed. You deserve a rest. You and Halric Stark both, said Catelyn. Yes, Prince Halric Stark, heir to the throne. One day you will be king of Westeros, Halric, my love. Chapter 38, Chapter 36. Chapter text. Rob 14. Halfway on the march to King's Landing, Rob was in his tent, on his own and sitting down on his bed. Once this is all over, I will have to fight in the Iron Islands. After that, will I have to fight again? I promised Ariane and Mother that I would never be a king like Robert. I won't be lazy or desperate to fight another war. I must be like how Father and Jon Arryn taught me. I will be good, I will be honorable, I will be just, I will be wise, and I will not fall into the temptations of the finer things in life, nor will I ever be unfaithful to Ariane. As king, I serve the kingdoms more than they serve me. To be king is not a privilege, it is a burden and a duty. His thoughts were interrupted when Oliver entered his tent. Your Grace, a raven from Riverrun. Rob stood up from his bed and Oliver passed him the letter. He opened it. Rob. Ariane has given birth to a healthy and beautiful little boy. My handsome grandson Halric. Sansa thought it would be nice for your son to leave a message for you, so find it at the bottom. We are all thinking of you and praying for this to all be over. But remember this, it was obsession with revenge which drove Robert Baratheon to unintentionally sow dissension and division across the whole realm. Do not let your vengeance cloud your judgment. Come back to your family safe and sound, to me, to your sisters, to your brothers, to your wife and to your son. Mother. I'm a father now. I have a son, called Halric, Rob thought as he reread the letter and saw what his lady mother was talking about. There was a tiny handprint on the bottom of the letter. It was a handprint that had been dipped into an ink pot. Rob brushed his thumb against the tiny handprint and thought of Ariane. I should have stayed behind, to be there with her. Never again. I will always be there for her when she is with child. I will always be by her side. That night, he had allowed all to have a drink of Dornish and Reach wine in celebration for his son's birth. He went to bed hearing soldiers, knights and nobles all around toasting to Prince Halric. For the next several days on the march to King's Landing, Rob felt more energetic. He felt as though that this would all soon be over and that he would be back with Ariane and be with their son. It was 6 days after reading the news of Halric's birth, that he had Oliver bring Sir Davos to his tent. Your Grace, said Sir Davos as he bowed his head. Sir Davos, I hope that I don't offend you now, for I know that you've been a good and lawful man for many years, but I need you to use your talents from your old days as a smuggler, said Rob. Your Grace, he asked. To take King's Landing, I have a plan, which I hope will save lives on both sides. I want to end this war without sacking the city like Tywine did at the end of Robert's rebellion. I don't want unnecessary bloodshed or the deaths or sufferings of innocent people, he explained. I see. What do you need me to do, Your Grace? He asked, with an approving smile as though he was glad of Rob's plan in the hopes of saving lives of innocent people. I need you to smuggle a little more than 20 of the best warriors in the army inside, before they seal off the gates and the harbor. We'll set up perimeters and pickets as soon as we arrive. But on the morning after we start the siege, I want you and the chosen 23 to infiltrate and kill the gate guards and open the gates. It will be done, Your Grace. Whom will go with me? He asked. Oliver. Rob called. His ever-dutiful squire entered his tent. Find each of these men and women and bring them here at once, Rob said before handing him a list. 23 of the best warriors in this army. Now, would you care for a drink whilst we wait? Rob asked after Oliver ran out of the tent to locate each of those on the list. Thank you, Your Grace, he said. Rob poured them both a glass of wine and they drank a toast to Prince Halric Stark. Prince Halric. My son is a prince and will be king if this is all successful. His thoughts were interrupted when Oliver returned. Your Grace, the men and women you requested. And inside came Garlan and Loras Tyrell, Oberyn, Nymeria and Tyen Sand, Harryon, Torrhen and Eddard Karstark, Small Janumber, Lucas Blackwood, Ben Coldwater, Creighton and John Redfort, Pewinfrey, Robin Flint, Roland Wainwood, Brian of Tarth, Patrek Malister, Donal Swan, Demon Sand, Robar Royce, Iman Cui, Bryce Caron and Daikon Tali. Sirs, my lords and ladies, I have a task of the highest importance for all of you. If it is successful, then the city will fall, without a long and bloody siege that would cost the lives of tens of thousands on both sides and many thousands of innocent lives. Now, if any of you wish to leave, none of us would think little of you. But you will not get a chance to leave again. None turned around to leave. All faced Rob dutifully. Today, you will leave with Sir Davos Seaworth and get to the water. You will take a boat and Sir Davos will smuggle you all inside the city, before the army gets to the outskirts and they shut and seal the gates and the harbor from all of the outside world. On the morning the day after the siege begins, you will get to the gates and kill the guards and open the gates for our army. Is that all clear? He asked. Yes, Your Grace, came the reply. Very good. Sir Davos, said Rob, gesturing for the Onion Knight to speak. Right. Say your goodbyes and be at the edge of camp by sundown. We leave tonight, said Sir Davos before taking his leave, followed by the chosen 23. When it seemed that he was all alone in his tent, Rob whispered, Do you understand what you need to do? I do, replied a whisper. Do you have all that you need? He asked. Yes, said the whisper. Good. Then you must leave now. Good luck, he said. Goodbye. I'll see you in the Red Keep. Tyrion 14. As soon as they had received word that Robb Stark and his army of 100,000 were marching to King's Landing and were on the King's Road passing by Rosby, the gates were closed shut to the outside world and the harbour was closed now that Blackwater Bay was blockaded by the ships of Storm's End and the Eyrie. 4 days after the gates were shut, Tyrion was walking on the walls with Bronn, wondering what he would do when this was all over. The Stark army is here, shouted a gold cloak. Tyrion looked out from the battlements and could see tens of thousands of soldiers from all over Westeros were arriving and setting up defenses, pickets and perimeters. The contrast between this and Stannis' siege is remarkable. What is he planning? He was in the Red Keep's throne room when a messenger arrived. It was cousin Lancel, whom had been captured by patrols when he was leading a scouting party. Uncle Kevan looked delighted to see his eldest son alive and well. He at least shows emotions at seeing his children return to him alive and well, unlike his older brother, my father. Lancel. Are you all right? Uncle Kevan said, running up to his son and hugging him, having been scared of the thought of never seeing him again when he heard that he had been captured. I am fine, father. But I bring a message from Robb Stark, father, which I am to bring to the hand of the king, he replied as they broke from the hug, loudly for all to hear. What's the message? Asked Tywine, standing near the Iron Throne as Joffrey sat down, angrily gripping the armrests and looked close to an outburst. Try not to cut yourself, Your Grace, the Iron Throne can do that, especially when the one sitting on it is in the middle of an angry tantrum like a spoiled child not getting more lemon cakes or sweeties. Lancel drew a letter out of his pocket. He gave it to his father. "Read it for us all to hear," Kevan said. Tywine. Kevan opened the letter and said to Lord Tywine Lannister, Hand of the King. "I have only one offer before this siege begins in earnest. I will allow you one day, only one, to surrender peacefully. No innocent people need to die in a bloody siege, and I don't want this shit-stinking city or its people to suffer any more than they need to. Only those who have harmed my family or the realm in some particular way have reason to fear what I will do if you surrender, but all others, I have no wish to see die. To show your acceptance of my terms, merely walk in front of the king's gate and leave it open with white flags hanging from the gatehouse. If you do not, by sunrise tomorrow, prepare for a long and bloody siege. These terms are non-negotiable." He then passed the letter to Tywine whilst Tyrion looked around the courts and could see scared and frightened people all around. "Robb Stark has won and we are unable to hold out for long and force him into peaceful negotiations. All of this would never have happened if my repulsive shit of a nephew hadn't beheaded Ned Stark. Never. I will never surrender. I am the one true king. I will not give up, not when these traitors are outside these walls. Anyone who dares talk of surrender or peace is a traitor and will be executed." Joffrey said angrily, only for Tywine to ignore him and dismiss the court before he could do any further idiotic things. "And still, he offers no great words of wisdom or suggestions as to how we will survive this and ensure his continued reign, unendurable as it is. How alike he is to his mother, in that they lose touch of reality." Tyrion, Jaime and Uncle Kevan walked toward the Lord of Casterly Rock. "How go the defenses of the city?" he asked. "We have a total of 33,000 ready to defend the city, father. And we have some 5,000 reserves, but they are all wounded veterans from fighting Stannis. They will be on the battlements of the Red Keep, unless they are required to be at the walls of the city," said Jaime. "And what of wildfire?" Tywine asked Tyrion. "Not enough to kill thousands of them. The ingredients needed to make wildfire are unavailable because what is needed comes from kingdoms at war with us," said Tyrion, "which is to say, all of them." The four Lannisters left the Red Keep and walked to the walls, and looked out at the army of Robb Stark. "What is he doing?" Uncle Kevan asked rhetorically. "He's not attacking right now. Out of honor from his message, he's waiting until our deadline is over," said Jaime. "No, he has a plan." "He always has a plan," said Tywine. "We can hold off any siege assault, Tywine. We have the men at the ready for it and more than enough weapons and supplies," said Kevan. "And what of food?" Tywine asked. "We have enough food for the garrison, the army and the people for a whole 6 moons, assuming that no soldiers are removed from guarding the granaries and supply stores," said Tyrion. As Tyrion walked back to the Red Keep, he knew that any attempt to hold the city would be unsuccessful. Stark has shown he can outfight any opponent. And we have no wildfire like we did before. We can't win this war, nor can we force them back and enforce negotiations. Robb Stark will take King's Landing and feed Joffrey to Grey Wind." Tyrion entered the Red Keep and heard many couriers and nobles fearfully whispering about how they may escape the city or try to surrender. Tyrion looked at the Iron Throne to see his pathetic nephew sitting down, with his sword on his lap and his crossbow in his hands. Is he hoping that he can go out there and kill Robb Stark? He met with Bronn, Podrick and Shae in his chambers. "What will happen, my lord?" Podrick asked. "Robb Stark will attack. Neither the king nor my father will surrender. As much as I don't want my family to suffer, I know that he will come and take the city. I just wished there was a way we could negotiate," said Tyrion. He heard footsteps outside of his chamber and he turned around. There was Eileen Payne, scowling hatefully and cruelly at them. The only ones whom he didn't look at with such looks were Joffrey, Cersei and Tywine. "Something I can help you with, Payne?" Tyrion asked. He just grunted at him before walking away. "That's the most conversation that I've ever heard from that cheerful old bugger," said Bronn. "Is there any way that we can escape?" Shae asked. "I wish there was. Ironically, the best way to keep safe right now is if we were arrested and thrown into the Black Cells," said Tyrion. Tyrion slept calmly with Shae that night. And he woke up, and walked to have breakfast. He ate and drank quickly, fearing that any moment, the bells would ring and the attack would begin. Jaime was pacing up and down the throne room, his hand resting on his sheathed sword's handle and sweating. Tyrion walked to his brother and Jaime said, "Whatever happens, thank you, Tyrion, for freeing me from the Starks. I would have done it all over again if I knew it would all lead to this day," said Tyrion. "You know, when the exchanges were made, Catelyn Stark told me to look around all of the Riverlands as we came back to King's Landing and asked if my love for Cersei was worth all of the death and destruction that has been inflicted. Every moment on the journey back to King's Landing, it's been haunting my mind," he said. "Is it worth it?" Tyrion wondered. "No. What was the point of saving lives by killing the Mad King if it only came to this?" he replied. "If you knew then what you know now, would you do it again?" Tyrion asked. "No, I wouldn't. I don't love her. She's been unfaithful to me many times. If she did love me, she wouldn't have fucked Lancel, half of the sellswords in her pay and gods know how many others. But, in a way, it does make me glad that there is a chance that Joffrey isn't mine at all. And of her children, she only truly loves Joffrey, not Myrcella or Tommen. She ruined everything by letting Joffrey get away with what he wants. I just wish I could have stayed at Casterly Rock and not agree to being in the Mad King's Kingsguard," he said. "Good. I'm glad that you at last see reason." Suddenly the bells rang. Tyrion and Jaime looked out at the city's gates. Jaime tightened the grip on his sword. "Good luck. And come back safely, you fool," Tyrion said before hugging him. "I will, brother. I will," Jaime said, crying as he hugged him hard and turned to the gates, following their father, Uncle Kevan and Lancel. "Uncle Tyrion!" Myrcella called. Tyrion turned around to see her and Tommen. "What is wrong, my dear?" he asked. "Mother says that we're all to hide in her solar," she said. He saw Joffrey running past, not wearing his armor. How did he avoid father's watchful gaze and run at the first sound of trouble? He followed his niece and nephew into the king's solar and already there was Cersei, Joffrey, dozens of ladies and old courtiers. And guarding the doors were Sir Meryn Trant, Sir Asmund Kettleback and Eileen Payne. "Are there any others?" Cersei asked as she briefly hugged Myrcella and Tommen. "No, your grace," said Sir Meryn as he looked out from the doors. "Seal the doors," Sir Meryn said. Joffrey. Sir Meryn sealed the doors. When Tyrion turned to see them shut, he noticed Eileen Payne had a short sword strapped to his belt. "Has Cersei ordered him to kill us all if they do breach the Red Keep? Bronn is protecting Podrick and Shae in my chambers. They'll be safe there, hopefully. Now, we just wait," Tyrion thought as he looked around. "Are ships approaching?" Tyrion asked, unable to see the view of the bay. Cersei looked out. "No. They've destroyed our ships but they're not coming to the harbor. Why don't they have ships attacking and landing troops into the harbor?" Cersei asked rhetorically as all eyes were looking outside. "Something is wrong. I can feel it in my gut and in my balls." "But what? What's going on?" Tyrion thought. And then he heard a cruel and scary laugh behind him. "You fucking idiots," said the voice. "No. That's impossible. I haven't heard that voice in over 20 years. Tyrion turned around to see Eileen Payne, laughing, and even more terrifying, he was grinning. "It's over, Lannisters. The war is over," he said, drawing his short sword. "Fuck, he really is talking. But, that's impossible. I saw his tongue ripped out by hot pincers in the throne room all those years ago, by order of the Mad King." Meryn and Asmund reached for their swords. In a flash, Eileen stabbed Asmund in his groin and then his throat, and as Meryn drew his sword, Eileen artfully bounced around as though he was dancing and cut across Meryn's chainmail on his backside. He screamed as he fell to his knees, and then Eileen cut his sword from his hand, severing a few of his fingers in the process. As he screamed, Eileen knelt down and whispered something in his ear. Tyrion could only hear the word Syrio. "What?" Finally, Eileen cut his throat and kicked him to the floor before facing Tyrion, Joffrey, Cersei, Myrcella, Tommen and over 50 nobles. Eileen smiled again and said as he pointed his sword at them, "You murdered my father, you tried to get me, but you didn't. That was your first mistake. Leave just one wolf alive, and the sheep are never safe. Especially now that winter has come." "What the fuck is he talking about? Winter has come. Wolf. His father. Unless. and then he reached for his neck and grabbed hold of his skin. He pulled hard. Tyrion's eyes opened wide when the skin was coming off. And finally, his face was pulled off as though it was a mask and dropped onto the floor. Tyrion looked up from the face of Ailyn Payne, to see a familiar face standing before him, drenched in blood and wielding a bloody sword. "Arya Stark. You're one of the faceless men," said Tyrion, taking a step back, shivering. Tyrion was afraid during the Battle of Blackwater, but here, he had never been more terrified than he ever felt in his life. "You always were one of the clever ones of your family, Tyrion. Unlike your stupid brother fucking whore of a sister and this inbred shit-faced cunt," she said as she pointed her sword at Cersei and then Joffrey. Cersei looked too shocked to say anything. Joffrey was shaking as he was pointing at Arya. "What's wrong? No guards to call for? No help going to come? You're all alone?" "The only one here with a weapon is me," she said before kicking up the swords of Asmund and Meryn into the air and grabbing them and placing them by the door. "What is going on out there, Lady Arya?" Tyrion asked. "My brother is taking the city. He preferred to take it without unnecessary bloodshed. So, he sent 23 of his best to infiltrate the city before the gates shut to the world. They opened the gates this morning, and by now, they should be getting close to the Red Keep." "Don't worry, we haven't got long to wait," said Arya, waving her sword around a few times, flickering drops of blood onto the floor as she waved it. Cersei drew a bottle from a pocket in her dress. Suddenly there was a shatter of glass and the bottle was shattered to pieces, which led to Cersei a shriek and recoil. "Nice try, Your Grace. No easy way out for you today," said Arya. Tyrion saw what did it, a tiny needle-like dagger. "Where's the Real Ailyn Payne?" Tyrion asked. "He's dead. I got inside a few days ago and killed him, just as he murdered my father. His corpse and his head are now food for the fish," she replied. "What happens to us, Arya?" Myrcella asked, whilst she was protectively hugging Tommen. "Nothing for you, Tommen, or for Tyrion. Robb has made it clear that any who surrender or have done no wrong will not die. As for your brother and your mother, that's for Robb to decide," said Arya with an unsettling grin. "If you want to kill me, then do it. But let my son live." Cersei shouted. She looked genuinely afraid, like Tyrion had never seen before. Arya glared at her darkly. She slowly shook her head and said, "No, no, no. You shits murdered my father. You will all suffer for what you've done to my family. I am the king. You will open those doors and let us go, or you will die like your father." Joffrey screamed as he stood to face her in front of Tyrion. "Step back, you fucking idiot." Arya just smiled and kicked him in the balls and pushed him back into his mother's arms. The crown had fallen off his head and Arya picked it up whilst he yelled in pain and glaring evilly at Arya. "You're not king anymore, Joffrey Waters," she said before laughing. "If you want to kill my sister and my nephew, why haven't you?" Tyrion asked. "Believe me, there's nothing I'd love to do more than kill them. But, unlike you lot, my brother believes in justice and fair trials. Something that you never gave my father," she replied. Tyrion could hear loud and thundering footsteps and voices from behind the door. "Quiet!" Arya angrily whispered to the whispering and frightened people she held hostage. "Arya Stark! Arya Stark! It's me, Gendry Baratheon," called the voice. "Time to go," Arya said with a sneering grin before unsealing the doors. The nobles and courtiers all started running out. Arya pointed her blade at Tyrion, Joffrey, Cersei, Myrcella and Tommen and said, "Let's go. Any attempts to escape, and I'll cut your heels. I won't try to escape then, for I love to walk and use my legs, short as they are." Chapter 39, Chapter 37. Chapter Text. Gendry 14. Robb had told all the lords in the Council of War what the plan was. "What if they are caught?" Sir Brynden asked after Robb had explained the plan of infiltration. "Then we plan another attack. I have the utmost confidence in Sir Davos' abilities in getting them into King's Landing and getting to the gate. And there are 23 great warriors and knights going to open the gates. They will open them," Sir Brynden Robb said confidently. The gates did open, just as he had planned. "This is it. This truly is it. We've done it. Now all we need to do is storm inside and kill Tywin Lannister and take the Red Keep, and this war will end for good. Gendry stood with the Storm Lords and the warriors of the Stormlands. The scum we fight today are the cowards who murdered Robert Baratheon. They have done all they can to burn and pillage kingdoms and murder innocents. But that ends today, sons of the storm. From this day forth, no more will tyrants rule Westeros. And when the Lannister lion flags are torn from this shitty city, the Stormlands will finally be avenged for all that we've suffered. Gendry shouted to his men. My first ever speech, Gendry thought as he had raised his hammer and shield. Soldiers, knights and nobles cheered for him. Meryn passed him his bullhead helmet and he donned it. This is for you, father, he whispered before he raised father's hammer as high as he could and shouted, ours is the fury. Ours is the fury, the Stormlanders shouted as he led them through the gates. Through the mud gate, he saw 5 gold cloaks. They threw down their weapons and raised their hands the moment that they saw them. Fucking gold cloaks. Cowards like you've always been, he said out loud for them to hear. Pity that Janos Slynt isn't here. I'd love to have smashed his head in. Then he saw a knight in Lannister armor charge at him, sword raised and shield covering his breastplate. Gendry blocked his sword blow and knocked him at his helmet with his shield. He swung his hammer, hitting him in the chest before landing a fatal blow onto his helmet, blood and brains splashing out as he pulled his hammer out of his skull. Robb had made it clear that there was to be no looting, no rapes, no murders and no burning. He had told this to all of his men beforehand, and he was willing to smash in the head of any man who dared to disobey these orders. And when he did come across those who surrendered, he threatened execution to any man who murdered surrendering prisoners. He had led his men towards the Red Keep, remembering the way from his days as squire to Harrold. He came to the gates of the Red Keep. He saw a tall and blonde knight standing at the top. Who are you? He shouted. I am Sir Davin Lannister. Who are you? He demanded. I am Sir Gendry Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, he replied. You're Gendry the Stormhammer. I remember you from the melee, though I lost to Loras Tyrell before we could fight, he said. Yes, I remember also. But, Sir Davin, you have a choice today. You can surrender now, and you and your men will not be harmed. Any man of mine who dares to try to murder you or your men, and I promise to smash his head in, on that you have my word. But, if you would rather die with honor, then I would honor your wish, said Gendry. Davin looked out across the city. Gendry turned around to do the same. He could see that it was over. The city was falling from all directions. Their army was totally inside. Do your promise, Sir Gendry. On your life, he asked. Gendry took his bull's head helmet off and faced Sir Davin. Yes. On my life, sir, I swear it, Gendry replied. Sir Davin nodded gravely and turned to his men and shouted, open the gates. The gates opened and Gendry said, put your weapons down and stay here. Gendry led his men inside the Red Keep and he looked around the throne room. Lannister lion banners everywhere. Arya Stark. Arya Stark. It's me, Gendry Baratheon, he called. Robb had told he and Harrold about his and Arya's plan of preventing Cersei and Joffrey escaping and fleeing to Essos like Viserys and Daenerys Targaryen. Dozens of nobles, girls, women and elderly ran out from the rooms to the right of the Iron Throne. They stopped and begged for mercy when they saw Gendry standing before them, blooded and wielding a giant and monstrous hammer. Where is Joffrey and Cersei? He asked. Before any could say anything, you need not be afraid, lords and ladies. None of you will be harmed, just tell me, where are they? Here they are, Gendry said, a familiar voice. And there he could see the wild, but beautiful Arya Stark. Gods, in another life I'd have fallen in love with her, he thought as he saw her with a bloody short sword drawn and pointing it at Cersei and Joffrey. The evil monsters who murdered all other bastards of my father in this city, my brothers and sisters, some of them still little babes. And you murdered my father. You would have killed me had you the chance, and if you knew. You didn't give me the chance of meeting my father properly or him knowing that I am his son. He walked to them both and he powerfully punched Joffrey in the stomach. That's for daring to call yourself a Baratheon, you inbred Lannister cunt. Joffrey groaned and fell to the floor, gasping and moaning. Gendry thought he had heard a bone break from his punch. Then he turned to Cersei. As for you, you murdered my father, you murdered my brothers and sisters and destroyed innocent lives all over this country. And look where it's fucking got you now, he said whilst pointing at her before she faced him with fierce eyes. She looked as though she was about to argue with him until her eyes opened wide when she recognized her late husband's hammer in Gendry's hands. You thought that you slaughtered all of the stags, but you fucking didn't, he shouted before he tore the queen's crown from her head and threw it as far away from her as he could. She stared at her crown as though it was the most important thing in her life. And it was then that he heard Mor enter the Red Keep. Gendry turned around to see Robb, Harold, Ed Muir, Sir Brynden, Prince Oberyn and Mace Tyrell enter the throne room. Kevan Lannister and Jaime Lannister also entered the throne room, escorted by a dozen armed soldiers. Jaime! Cersei shouted to him as though he would save them and kill all of their enemies. He ignored her with a scowl on his face. Ha! He's not saving you today, you whore. Where is my father? Cersei demanded of Robb. He is dead. It's all over now, he said simply before turning to his soldiers. Take Joffrey Waters and Cersei Lannister to the Black Cells and locate all members of the small council. No. I will kill you all. I am the king. I will not die today. I will have your head, Stark. Fight me. Joffrey shouted. The last time you two fought, Robb won, and he was using a practice sword whereas you were using a castle-forged sword. Harold shouted, which had many laughs. The results would be the same even if Robb fought naked and with his fists, commented Prince Oberyn, which drew more laughter. Robb drew ice and said, if that's what you want, Joffrey, come here and die like the coward I know you to be. Joffrey took a sword from a dead soldier and charged at Robb, screaming. This is too funny to not miss. Robb parried his blow easily and swiveled around before he cut across at both of Joffrey's kneecaps. Joffrey screamed as he fell on his knees. Yes, kill the evil monster, Robb. For all that he has done to the world and to your family. Please. Robb. Please. Forgive me. I did as I was told by Grandfather Tywine. I am sorry. I didn't want any of this. I don't deserve this. You are the king, your grace, he pleaded pathetically. Robb shook his head and raised the enormous Valyrian steel greatsword and chopped his head off. Gendry grinned and nodded when he saw the head roll around on the floor as Cersei screamed hysterically whilst being held back by two soldiers. No one gives a shit about you, your grace. Not after all of those who've died just for you to have power. If I had my way, I'd impale you on the blades of the Iron Throne, so that in death, you can finally have what you've always wanted. We've won. Now, comes the harder part. Controlling the entire we now rule, said Robb as he walked towards the Iron Throne and Cersei was carried by several soldiers to the Black Cells. He hugged Arya tightly on his walk there and said, it's all over now. We've done it, before hugging her once more. He resumed walking to the Iron Throne, with Arya walking next to him. He looked at it and he shook his head. He turned to his own household guards and pointed at the cellar door as he said, lads, take this fucking chair into the cellars where they keep the dragon skulls. I never want to see it here ever again. 10 men picked it up and were being guided down there whilst Gendry and Harold joined Robb and Arya. What are you going to replace the Iron Throne with? Harold asked. Ironwood thrones. For the king and the queen, Robb replied. Catelyn 14. 2 weeks after Halric's birth, Catelyn was called by Maester Vimen. My lady, a raven from his grace, he said, passing a letter to her. She opened it. She couldn't believe it. It's over. It's finally over, she managed to say, though it was little more than a whisper. This is it. Robb is now king. She ran to Arianne's bedchambers, where she had just finished breastfeeding Halric, and Arianne's cousins, Sarilla and Elia Sand, were helping Arianne put him to bed. He's as hungry for them as his father, Arianne commented as she kissed his forehead gently. My lady, Elia politely said, bowing her head when she saw Catelyn. Arianne turned around to see Catelyn and she could see the excited look on her face. Is there news? She asked. Yes, Robb has killed Joffrey. King's Landing has fallen, she said. Arianne hugged her good mother and her cousins before leaving the chambers and closing the door. And now you will be queen of the 7 kingdoms, and little Halric will be the most handsome little prince in the 7 kingdoms. Sarilla said excitedly for her cousin. But, make sure to send him to Dawn when he is of an age to be a ward. There's so much that he can learn in Sunspear, Elia said naughtily. Eventually, when her cousins calmed down, Arianne asked Caitlin, will we go to King's Landing soon? Yes, we will leave tomorrow morning. We, Sansa, Roslin and Halric. And perhaps a Maester in case Sansa gives birth on the way, Caitlin said. Caitlin decided to go to see father. Even now, a year after Lysa's funeral, still father was very unwell. Father. It's me, Cat, she said gently as she opened his bedchamber door. Cat. Oh, my cat, he said as he sat up in his bed. She hugged him gently and he kissed her forehead and asked, and how is my great-grandson? He is well. He is in bed right now, she said as she pulled up a chair to sit next to him. And Robb? Is he all right? He asked. He is, father. He has taken King's Landing and killed Joffrey, and Tywin Lannister is dead. Robb will be crowned king soon, she said. The elderly and unwell Lord of Riverrun's face swelled with pride at hearing those words. My grandson, King of the Seven Kingdoms. If the Seven are good, he and young Halric will be better kings than the Targaryens and the Baratheons ever were. Are you going to King's Landing now? He asked. Tomorrow morning, father. I just wish that you could come to see your grandson crowned, she said, as her eyes began to moisten. Don't worry about me, Cat. I'm just happy to be with my family in my final days. And what of Edmure and Roslin? Are they all right? He asked. They are. Roslin is with child. And Edmure is taking his husband vows seriously, she replied. About fucking time too, he said with a smirk, and the two laughed. Suddenly, he paused and looked to the roof, confused. He finally turned to Caitlin and asked, Cat, is that you? Yes, father. Edmure and Roslin are having a child, she said, as tears swam down her face at father's poorly state. The noble Hoster Tully was once such an active and diligent man, always living up to the words of House Tully. But now he was a fragile wreck of man and would often forget. They are. Oh, excellent, he said with a smile before he saw his daughter's tears. Cat, what is it? Why do you cry? He asked, before hugging his daughter. I'm sorry, father. Robb is king now. Joffrey and Tywin Lannister are dead, she said before breaking from the hug. Truly. Oh, that is wonderful news. Will you and Arianne go to King's Landing soon? Yes, tomorrow, she said, wiping the tears from her face. I'm sorry that I cannot come there with you, he said before hugging her again and kissing her forehead. I love you, Cat, he said. I love you, too, father, she said before standing up. She walked to the balcony and looked out at the rivers. Robb will be king of the Seven Kingdoms, and Bran will be Lord of Winterfell and Warden of the North. And Edmure will be Lord of Riverrun, soon. Why does this illness plague my father so? Mother, she heard. She turned around to see Sansa, now heavily with child. She hugged Caitlin and said, Ari told me about Robb. This is wonderful. We're going tomorrow. Yes, and we'll take a Maester with us in case you need to give birth on the way, said Caitlin, kissing her daughter's forehead and hugging her. Is everything okay? She asked, seeing her mother's sad state. I was just with your grandfather, she said as she let go of her daughter and sat down at the balcony. How is he? Asked Sansa. He's forgetful. More so than he once was. But now that this is all over, she tried to say. You'll be able to return home to Winterfell for Bran and Rickon. Robb will be in King's Landing and I will be in the Eyrie, said Sansa. Winterfell. Bran and Rickon. I haven't seen either of them in 16 moons. Not since I left Winterfell with Robb and marched to war. It won't be the same without Ned. Nothing will be the same without Ned. How are you feeling? She asked Sansa, not wanting to talk about topics that made her upset. I'm feeling well. Maester Vimen said that I could be giving birth in a moon or before, she said, placing her mother's hand on her belly. A real fighter, said Caitlin as she felt her grandchild moving. Harry said that it was either a boy who would be like him or a girl who would be like Arya, she said with a smile. Chapter 40, Chapter 38. Chapter text. Harold 14. Robb had wasted no time soon after the fall of King's Landing. Soon after killing Joffrey, he met each member of the small council individually and decided whether they deserved to be executed. Lord Varys has already fled, though no one knew where he had gone. Robb had released Davon Lannister. But he decided to hold a trial for Grand Maester Pycelle when Tyrion Lannister had told him of his involvement in betraying his father and that Pycelle was the one whom persuaded the Mad King to open the gates to Tywin Lannister and his army in Robert's rebellion, only for Tywin to brutally sack the city. Pycelle was later executed by Robb. And then, in the throne room before gathered nobles of nearly all kingdoms and with Gendry standing at his side at the front of the assembled nobles, Robb had Tyrion and Kevan Lannister stand before him. I hold neither of you guilty for the crimes committed by other members of your family, for I know both of you to be good men. And so, Lord Tyrion Lannister, I would gladly name you Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West, as is your birthright. And Lord Kevan Lannister, I would name you Lord of Castle Meria, and I give you permission to lead the Westerland's army back home, he proclaimed. Both looked surprised by his generosity. Kevan Lannister bowed his head in thanks. Tyrion asked pardon, Your Grace, but what of my nephew and niece, Tommen and Myrcella? I have already legitimized them as Lannisters, as we all know what the truth about them was. But, Lord Tyrion, I would ask that you name Tommen as your heir, unless you have a son, Robb replied. I do not have a son, but I would gladly name my nephew as my heir, he replied before bowing. The next was Jaime Lannister. Sir Jaime Lannister, though you are known around the world as the Kingslayer and you attacked the Riverlands alongside your father without provocation and tried to sack Riverrun, I will always be grateful to you for avenging my grandfather and my uncle and for saving King's Landing from being destroyed in a final act of madness by the Mad King. And for these things, I offer you a choice. You may join the Night's Watch to regain your lost honor, or you may return to Casterly Rock alongside your brother, but as a knight and man-at-arms, and to let go of your vows as a Kingsguard, and while you may marry and have children, you will forsake the right to hold lands should you accept this choice. Very generous of you, Robb. But does he deserve such a choice, after all that he's done? The Kingslayer looked down at his feet and then at Robb as if he couldn't believe what his choices were, as though he was expecting to be executed or sent to the wall. I choose the latter, Your Grace, he replied. Very well, said Robb with a nod. Jaime bowed and sincerely said thank you so much, Your Grace, before he walked to join Tyrion and Kevan. Tyrion beamed at Robb for sparing his brother and giving him such a generous offer. There were many murmurs of surprise and disappointment around the nobles of the court at Jaime's sentence. Now, my next act as king, is regarding the small council. It is being replaced, said Robb. Replaced? What with? A tall council that only northern giants can be in. How come he didn't tell me and Gendry about this earlier? We have all heard the stories of greed of wealth and power corrupting good men. In the 300 years since Aegon Targaryen conquered the Seven Kingdoms, no improvements have been made since those days. None. Much has remained the same in terms of cities, castles and artisanship. Loyalists to the Targaryens would claim that the near 300 years that they ruled Westeros were the best days in Westeros history. A time of peace and prosperity. But that is wrong. There was always a war in the reign of almost all of the Targaryen kings. They spent no money or thought to thinking of the future. And with each position on the small council, there is limitless opportunities for power and wealth, something I wish to curtail and remove any chance of corruption, for we all are aware of the story of Petyr Baelish. And with that in mind, I intend to add more positions to the council, forming the Grand Council. At the proclamation of more positions for the Grand Council, many quietened down and looked to the king with greed, though there were also several nobles who were honorable and looked at these greedy nobles with disdain for ignoring the king's words about corruption just now. Old gods and new, that feels like 10 years ago when the three of us, Arianne and Uncle Jon, arrested Petyr Baelish. And the first position to fill, is of course the hand of the king, he announced. At that, many ambitious nobles started either trying to stand taller or take a few steps forwards to be seen by Robb, in particular Mace Tyrell. Harold did no such thing as he stood with Gendry. I just want to go home to the Eyrie and be with my family. I don't want to be in this Grand Council. I have no desire to come back to this fucking ugly city unless it is important, Harold whispered to him. Same here. Though, we might be going back to war to fight the Greyjoys, Gendry pointed out. Damn, I forgot about them. Hopefully if they have any sense, they'll back down and swear fealty when they realize that they can't outfight us without their Iron Fleet. Lord Tyrion Lannister, would you accept my offer of being named the Hand of the King? Robb asked. A fine choice, Harold thought as he turned to face Tyrion. He stepped forwards a few steps and bowed and said, Your Grace, I am surprised that you would entrust such an honor to me, when only last moon, I was your enemy. But I vow that I shall do all that I can to serve the realm. Lord Tyrion, you remain one of the few good men I have met who enjoys to play the Game of Thrones, and I trust you to not be corruptible and to always be honest with me, said Robb before looking back to face the courtiers and nobles. Will Tyrion be loyal? Gendry asked Harold. All of his life, he has been looked down on because he is a dwarf, and if Tywin had had his way, Tyrion might never have inherited his birthright of Casterly Rock. But since Robb has made him just that and appointed him as his Hand of the King, Tyrion has no reason to ever betray Robb, Harold explained. As for the Master of Whispers, I would name Arya Stark, said Robb. Arya bowed and she accepted her brother's offer. Harold noticed how he didn't refer to her either as a lady or as a princess. A faceless woman as Master of Whispers. That'll make our enemies shit themselves, Harold whispered, at which he and Gendry chuckled. Lord Mace Tyrell, would you accept my offer of being the Master of Coin? Robb asked. Earlier he looked annoyed at not being named Hand of the King, but now he looked pompously proud at being offered the position of Master of Coin. I would, Your Grace. Thank you very much for such a great honor, he said with an ambitious and greedy smile. Bootlicking lickspittle. Have some respect for yourself. Why did he think that he would be named Hand of the King? Did he not listen to Robb's words about corruption earlier? Why is it that all of the ambitious people I have ever met are those who are too cruel or too incompetent? For the Master of Ships, I cannot think of a better man to fill this role than Sir Willis Marndaly, Robb announced. Sir Willis Marndaly, heir of White Harbour, had commanded the Marndaly fleet and had defeated the Lannister fleets at Blackwater Bay before they could be used to defend the city, just before the fall of King's Landing. Many Northern Lords cheered or roared their approval at a Northern Lord being appointed to a position in the High Council. Thank you for your trust in me, Your Grace. I vow to do all that I can for the Navy of the realm, he said as he bowed. As Master of Laws, I'm sure that many would agree with me that there is no better man for such a position than Lord Yohn Royce. The Lord of Runestone was one of the most honorable men that Harold had ever met, and one whom was dedicated to the law and to honor. Like with Sir Willis Marndaly, Vale Lords cheered and clapped at him being appointed to such an important position. Harold also clapped and cheered with them. You honor me with your offer, Your Grace. I can only hope to fulfill your expectations and to be faithful to the laws of the realm and to always uphold them and ensure that all follow them, from the most unfortunate of small folk to the wealthiest and most powerful of nobles, said the Lord of Runestone. Well said, especially about the part of nobles. Finally, there are 5 new positions I intend on creating. First being the Master of Swords, who is tasked with administering the armies of the kingdoms and of King's Landing. Secondly, the Master of Trade, to ensure good trade between the kingdoms of Westeros and also trade between Westeros and with all of Essos. The third position is the Master of Artisans, and their tasks are to rebuild damaged and destroyed castles, cities, villages and towns across the 7 kingdoms from war, and also to build improvements to said settlements. The fourth is the Lord Commander of the King's Army, who is tasked with commanding a royal standing army of elite soldiers and knights in King's Landing. And the fifth and final one, is the Lord Commander of the Gold Cloaks, who is entrusted with overseeing the security and safety of this city and ensuring that all Gold Cloaks uphold the law, never turn their back on injustice, and that they are not corruptible like they were under the leadership of Janos Slynt. Good ideas all around, Robb. But whom will you choose for each of these roles? Choose wisely, as long as they can do the jobs they are selected for and have no reason to betray you or try to profit more than they should, then all should be well, Harold thought as he looked around the court at all assembled nobles from all kingdoms of Westeros. Robb must have already picked out the lords for these new roles, Gendry whispered. You know Robb, he never goes into battle without a plan in place, Harold whispered in reply. For the position of Master of Swords, I choose Lord Jason Mallister, Robb announced just as the court had finished chatting amongst themselves. Lord Mallister stepped forth and bowed to the king whilst the Riverlords clapped and cheered. Among them was Ed Muir, who was now regarded as a hero of the Riverlands, for it was he who killed Tywin Lannister. I am honored with your trust in me, Your Grace, and I vow to do my utmost to fulfill my duties to the best of my ability. A good and honorable choice. For the Master of Trade, I choose Prince Oberyn Martell. Robb continued as Lord Mallister stood with the other chosen Grand Council members. Mace Tyrell looked annoyed at Prince Oberyn being chosen for the Grand Council. But Prince Oberyn merely grinned at Mace Tyrell's scowl as he accepted Robb's choice and bowed to the king whilst Dornish lords voiced their approval of his appointment. Your Grace, thank you for your offer and I shall repay it in full with successful trading inside and outside of Westeros. For the Master of Artisans, I choose Sir Baelor Hightower, Robb announced. Baelor Hightower approached Robb and bowed and thanked him whilst Mace Tyrell looked glad that his good brother was chosen for the Grand Council. Why him? Gendry asked in confusion. Probably because the Citadel is in his seat of Old Town and therefore the best minds in Westeros study there. And the Hightowers are one of the wealthiest of houses that don't rule one of the kingdoms, Harold explained. For the Lord Commander of the Royal Army, I have chosen Sir Brynden Blackfish. All lords of all kingdoms nodded or voiced their approval of the legendary Blackfish being selected for this role. He loyally bowed to his great-nephew and gruffly said, Your Grace, under my command, I vow to keep the Royal Army disciplined, trained and never falling to laziness or gluttony. And for the Lord Commander of the Gold Cloaks, I would name Lord Beric Dondarrion, Robb announced. The former leader of the Brotherhood without banners. A good decision, he is not corrupt like Janos Slynt and stands up against injustice and stands for all people, no matter their background or upbringing, Harold thought as the horrifically scarred and one-eyed Stormlord bowed to Robb and accepted his appointment. And finally, I think that all kingdoms should have a representative in the Grand Council to act on behalf of their liege lord in all important High Council sessions and act as their voice in particular matters which concern their respective country. So, for such roles, I choose Lord Robert Glover of the North, Lord Cale Vance of the Riverlands, Lord Daemon Marbrand of the Westerlands, Lord Eldon Estermont of the Stormlands, Lord Mathis Rowan of the Reach, Lord Trebor Jourdain of Dorne and Lady Anya Waynwood of the Vale. Once the war with the Iron Islands is over, a representative from there shall be appointed. The chosen lords looked pleased at being chosen for the Grand Council. Is that all now? Gendry asked. All but one. The Kingsguard, said Harold. During the fall of King's Landing, Sir Meryn Trant and Sir Asmund Kettleback were killed by Arya Stark, the last two of the Kingsguard. Tywin had decided against recruiting new members of the Kingsguard until the war was over. And now, for the Kingsguard. This has not been an easy decision, for there were many fine choices. All of whom are brave and skilled knights, whom I think had proven themselves on the field of battle with incredible valor, going above and beyond their orders in the name of their liege lord and their king. Robb spoke eloquently. Hearing his words of above and beyond their orders made many lords and knights in court hold their heads up high as if he was talking about them. Harold snorted at the sight of these men. One thing I do hope Robb does whilst he is king is to improve the court, Harold commented. In what way? Gendry asked. To make these lickspittles more honest and for them to not behave like bootlicking sycophants. Sycophancy is no way of currying favor with a king, especially not a northerner king, Harold replied, hoping that the northern trait of speaking one's mind would rub off on the court. But my decision has been made. Sir Torrhen Karstark, Sir Lucas Blackwood, Sir Robar Royce, Sir Loras Tyrell, Sir Pewin Free, Sir Creighton Redfort and Sir Brian of Tarth. Come forth, please, he announced. The chosen seven stepped from the crowd and stood at the foot of where the throne usually was and bowed to Robb. And I would name Sir Lucas Blackwood as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, Robb announced. Sir Lucas made no visible reaction as to being named Lord Commander, he just knelt before Robb and said, Thank you for this great honor, Your Grace. I vow by the old gods that my sword shall always defend you and your family until my last dying breath. Mace Tyrell, Harold noticed, looked annoyed as though he thought that Loras should have been named Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Whilst Tytos Blackwood looked very proud of his son. Lucas Blackwood is young, just a year older than me, yes, but he is a true knight, just like the Kingsguard of old. Neither arrogant, vain or proud. Just dutiful, honorable and chivalrous. And he is a capable leader on the battlefield and has more experience as a soldier than Loras Tyrell. Probably why Robb chose him. He and Torrhen Karstark are probably the first Kingsguard knights to worship the old gods. Now that all is concluded, it will be 2 weeks when Queen Arianne arrives for the coronation. And we would be honored by the presence of all of you, my lords and ladies, at the coronation. After which, We shall take the fight to the Greyjoys and end their rebellion once and for all, Robb announced, at which there was clapping and cheers. Good. And then I can go back home to Storm's End, said Gendry. Haven't you and Margaery prepared your wedding yet? Harold asked. We have. We shall marry here in King's Landing a week from now, just before the coronation. Whilst she goes to Storm's End after the coronation, I will join with Robb and fight the Ironborn, said Gendry. I'll be glad for all this fighting to be over. When I was a boy, I used to dream of fighting in wars. Now I just want to not fight again after this and to stay at home with Sansa and raise our children together, said Harold. Don't worry, it'll be over soon and you can be a husband and a father back home in the Eyrie, Gendry said before clapping him on the shoulder. I pray it to be so, to the old gods and the new. Gendry and Harold met with Robb just as the courtiers and nobles began to talk amongst themselves and the founding members of the Grand Council had started to chat. The Kingsguard were going to the blacksmith to be outfitted with weapons and armor fitting for their stations as Kingsguard. It's a shame that I cannot move court to Winterfell, Robb said. You will clean up King's Landing, I'm sure of that, Robb. It'll be nice to arrive in the city a year from now and find that it doesn't stink like the Seven Hells might stink, Harold commented. That's not what I mean, my friend. No, I despise this city. My grandfather was burned to death and my uncle was strangled to death in this very throne room, just a stone's throw away from where we stand. My father was beheaded on the steps of the Great September of Baelor. And how many of the small folk of this city and the nobles and courtiers in the Red Keep right now cheered and congratulated Joffrey when he murdered my father? Some of those who cheered for my father's death are probably here right now. I would hate this city also under those circumstances, Harold thought as he looked at the courtiers and nobles of the Crown Lands. He knew of them well enough from when he was his uncle's guest in King's Landing. And there were far too many lickspittles and bootlickers in court, all of whom only the last moon laughed heartily at Joffrey's taunts about Robb and approved of all his actions. Only the day before, Sir Aemon Free, who was the second son of Walder Free and was married to the sister of Tywin Lannister, approached Robb when he was speaking with Gendry and Harold in the Red Keep's gardens. The balding and weasel-faced Free bowed and said, with a greedy smile, Your Grace, I would proudly swear my fealty to you and offer to serve you as Lord of Harrenhal with the deaths of the last of the House of Went. Though I am sure you are aware I am married to Jenna Lannister, I would gladly have served alongside you in the war had I the chance, alongside my true family of House Free. But if you would allow me the chance to redeem myself, I vow that my sons and I shall serve you well and that I shall serve as an honourable and just Lord of Harrenhal and of the Riverlands as a loyal and faithful bannerman to your good Lord Grandfather and in the future to Lord Ed Muir. Pompous ass. Does he really think that he will succeed in trying to charm Robb into gifting him Harrenhal, once the seat of kings? When the war began, rather than fight alongside House Free, he and his sons willingly fought for the Lannisters. And Robb knows that. Why would he reward him for that? Besides, Harrenhal already has its own lord now that the last of its ruling house is safely returned home after the deaths of her lady mother and her brothers. Sir Aemon, I thank you for your pledge of loyalty, however I must regret to inform you that Harrenhal already has a new ruler. Sir Oliver Free, your half-brother, has married Lady Camelia Went and they rule Harrenhal now, Robb replied. A fine reward for his former squire, alongside his knighthood, matrilineally marrying the last member of a very noble house, Harold thought, whilst Aemon Free flushed red with embarrassment. Don't worry, Free, I'm sure that there is a castle in the Westerlands right enough for you, called Shitsport, Harold thought as he, Robb and Gendry walked away from him before he could try and poorly attempt to charm Robb into awarding him some other great castle or city. Interlude V. Daenerys Targaryen, Emilia Clarke. At court in the Great Pyramid of Meereen, Daenerys sat on her throne and could hear her dragons flying outside, whilst she gently stroked her belly. For so long, I thought that that which made me infertile. Thank the gods that she failed, and that House Targaryen will not be extinct should I die. Especially after Rorgal burned that impostor who dared to call himself my nephew Aegon. You stand in the presence of Her Grace, Daenerys Stormborn of the House Targaryen, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, the Queen of the Andals and the First Men and the Rhoynar, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, the Mother of Dragons, the Unburnt, Breaker of Chains, Missandei announced. Daenerys looked up to face the entrance to the throne room to see a bald and fat man in lion robes walking towards the throne room, escorted by two Unsullied. Seeing this man, Daenerys didn't think much of him, until she noticed looks of recognition from Sabaristan and Jorah. "Who is he?" "Your Grace, I am Varys. I used to serve your father as Master of Whispers for many years," he said. "And then you served Robert the Usurper and then Joffrey the Ill-Born," said Sabaristan. "Is this true, Lord Varys?" Daenerys asked. "It is, Your Grace. I felt my place was best served in the court of those two kings, for the sake of creating peace and to save the lives of innocent people. Whatever some may have thought of me, I have always done what I could to save the lives of innocent small folk of Westeros," said Lord Varys. "And I believe we have a mutual friend. Magister Illyrio Mapatis of Pentos," he said. "Illyrio? I have not seen that man in a long time. Not since my wedding to Drogo, and when Viserys and I were his guests." "Have you come to pledge fealty to House Targaryen once more, Lord Varys?" asked Daenerys. "I have, Your Grace, and to bring you information from the Seven Kingdoms," he said. "My birthright. And the birthright of my heir who grows inside me. Do usurpers still fight over my rightful throne?" Daenerys asked. "Not anymore, Your Grace. The realm is at peace once more, though under a new king, called Robb Stark," he said. Both Jorah and Sabaristan reacted when they heard that name. Jorah's face twisted into a deep frown whilst Sabaristan looked surprised, not unpleasantly surprised. "I know that Jorah dislikes all of the Starks simply for Ned Stark exiling him from his beloved home for selling poachers to a slaver, but what is Sabaristan's opinion of Robb Stark?" "Wait a moment, Lord Varys. What do you know of this Robb Stark?" she asked Jorah and Sabaristan. Jorah spoke first. "If he's taken the Iron Throne, he is probably the most foolish of all the Starks. But if he has taken it, he can't have done it without having a large army and many houses backing him." "True, but I have dragons, growing by the day. No number of armies can kill my dragons," she thought, but the thought that many houses backed this northern usurper did worry her. Do people not wish for the return of House Targaryen and for the return of stability to the realm? Or was that all another lie told by Illyrio to placate Viserys, and a lie Jorah told me to keep me from giving up on my birthright? "And what do you know of him, Sabaristan?" she asked. "Being the son of Ned Stark, he has been brought up an honorable young man, Your Grace, the same age as you. I met him several times in King's Landing when he was learning under Robert the Usurper's hand, Jon Arryn. I found him to be good company, honorable, dutiful, diligent, kind and respectful. It does surprise me that he would claim the Iron Throne for himself," he said. "It surprised many, Your Grace. But I must say, out of the 4 kings who fought for the Iron Throne, I am glad that it was Robb Stark who emerged victorious in that war," said Lord Varys. "Why?" asked Jorah. Lord Varys looked at Jorah, and Daenerys noticed him smile in a cunning way at him for a moment before looking back at Daenerys. There were 4 kings fighting for the Iron Throne. There was Robb Stark, Stannis and Renly Baratheon and Joffrey the Ill-Born. Joffrey was a cruel and evil boy who enjoyed having people tortured and killed for his own base pleasure. Renly thought himself a capable man who could be a great king, however he knew very little of being a ruler and spent a lot of money on petty things such as clothing, jewelry and fancy embroidery. In fact, he spent more time as Master of Laws in the Small Council than he did as Lord of Storm's End. As for Stannis, he was hard, just and strong, but proven to be without mercy. But according to my little birds back in Westeros, Robb Stark has brought stability to the realm in the last few weeks he has been king, before he and his queen are coronated. To put it bluntly, Your Grace, for the sake of the lives of the people of Westeros and for the stability of the realm, I am glad that Robb Stark won, for he is the kindest and most merciful out of the 4 contenders, and moves even now to fight rebellious Iron Islanders to end their attempts for independence of the Iron Throne," he said. "Are you here to serve me or to sing your admiration of a usurper who stole my birthright and whose father fought to overthrow my father and my family?" "You talk as if you admire him, Lord Varys," she asked. "I do, Your Grace. Given the circumstances that his family have suffered from the hands of the Lannisters and from your own family, I thought that he would be merciless and unforgiving to his enemies. But he has not needlessly slaughtered prisoners nor has he razed cities and castles to the ground. He has been wise, and now has all houses of the 7 kingdoms firmly under control. Houses that have broken faith with House Targaryen. You spoke of his queen. Whom is she?" asked Sabaristan. "Arianne of House Martell," he replied. The Martells. Why would they serve under a usurper such as he? Elia Martell was married to my brother and they were loyal in the rebellion. Don't they want justice for her and for my niece and nephew? Why would the Martells help Robb Stark take the throne? Asked Jorah. Because he gave them justice for Elia Martell and her children, by sending them their murderers, in chains. Prince Doran Martell had been planning to wed Arianne Martell to your brother, your grace, when he had an army to take back the Iron Throne, until his death. They chose to fight under Robb Stark, because he seemed the best choice to fight under, for justice for their house and for revenge against those whom wronged them, he explained. If I did come back to Westeros, Lord Varys, would I receive support from great houses and from the small folk? Daenerys asked. Your Grace, if you had asked me this question when Robert the Usurper was still king or just after Joffrey the Ill-Born was crowned and when the war began, I would have said yes without any doubt, he replied. But you don't think so now, she asked. I am afraid not, Your Grace. You see, my little birds have all said how kind and merciful Robb Stark has been and how his army have not been rampaging and raiding and committing all kinds of atrocities in comparison to the armies of the Westerlands under Tywin Lannister, and that now he is working hard in rebuilding all damage the war had done to the Seven Kingdoms. And he has been appropriately punishing all his own troops who have committed theft, rape or murder. And you spoke of crimes committed towards his family by my own. What do you speak of? She asked. Sir Barristan and Ser Jorah have not told you, Your Grace. How very curious, he said before glancing at them both. Neither made much of a reaction. The Lady Lyanna of House Stark, Robb's aunt, was taken by your brother Rhaegar, Your Grace. The heir to House Stark, Brandon, had rode to King's Landing and demanded justice for this insult towards his family and for his sister's safe return. But your father arrested him for daring to threaten the Crown Prince. He called for Lord Rickard Stark to King's Landing and he burned him alive in the throne room and had Brandon cruelly strangled as he tried to save his father, he explained. What? He must lie. Viserys never spoke of such things. Do you mock me, Lord Varys? I do not, Your Grace. For I was there when that happened. As was Sir Barristan, he said. Daenerys turned to Sir Barristan and he closed his eyes for a moment before he nodded and said, It is true, Your Grace. Your father wasn't the same man he once was after I had rescued him from imprisonment. He took a special pleasure in burning people alive, and after burning people, he would rape his queen. That means, I am a product of such attacks on my mother. Your father demanded the heads of Eddard Stark and of Robert Baratheon, Lyanna Stark's betrothed. Jon Arryn, their foster, had refused and led the armies of the Vale to join with the armies of the North, the Stormlands and the Riverlands to overthrow your father. Lord Varys finished. Was it true that my brother had kidnapped Lyanna Stark? She asked. Yes. Eddard Stark found his sister in a ruined castle in Dorne, guarded by the last 3 knights of the Kingsguard. She had died of a fever soon after he had reunited with her. All of Viserys' stories about Rhaegar were that he was a great man loved by the people and nobles alike. But he kidnapped a girl betrothed to another man and raped her when he was already married to another woman and had 2 children. Lord Varys, now that you are here, do you think that if I did return to Westeros with my army and my dragons, that I would have allies whom would support my return to the Iron Throne? She asked. There are a few whom would gladly serve House Targaryen, but there would also be houses who would want to benefit from your return to Westeros, simply for their families to gain high positions in court, Your Grace. However, Robb Stark is a great military tactician and commander. He even defeated an army of 130,000 sellswords hired by Tywin Lannister, including the Golden Company. But, now, the people are tired of war and want there to be peace, he said. The Golden Company? Asked Daenerys in surprise. And every sellsword force in Essos, Your Grace, which Tywin Lannister had hired, he explained. If he could peacefully subjugate the whole of Westeros solely with armies and not with dragons like Aegon the Conqueror had done, then it is no wonder Varys admires him. And if he has defeated every sellsword army in Essos, then that would mean any invasion would be no easy feat. For if I invaded, I would have less than 15,000 and my dragons. But, Your Grace, might I ask what you intend to do with your kingdom here in Slavers Bay if you were to leave for Westeros? I would still rule it, she replied confidently. Perhaps, Your Grace, you can give House Targaryen a new beginning here, by building and securing your reign here. Ending slavery and building a new Valyria here, he said. You would have Her Grace give up her birthright? Jorah demanded. I would stop lives from being pointlessly slaughtered. Both here and in Westeros. You could take back your birthright, Your Grace, of course. But you could also consolidate your rule here, learn more about how to be a wise ruler, build a greater army and a great navy, in preparation for a future invasion, led either by you or by your heir. The choice is yours, Your Grace. Chapter 41, Chapter 39. Chapter text. Arianne 14. It was a 10-day journey from Riverrun to King's Landing. And on the way, they had heard many stories by passing travelers or refugees returning home from King's Landing. Tywin Lannister had been killed in a duel by Edmure Tully. Robb had taken King's Landing by sneaking 23 of his best fighters into the city before they shut off the gates, 4 of whom were Daemon and Arianne's cousins Oberyn, Nymeria and Tyon. Most soldiers and gold cloaks had surrendered when they realized that they were under a mass attack. Robb had personally beheaded Joffrey. Robb had personally beheaded Cersei after he had allowed her one last farewell with her children. And with the war over, small folk were celebrating that life could return to normal. I hope it does, and that life for all does improve, with Robb as king and me as queen. I can't wait to see him and to introduce him to little Halric. But with Sansa's due date seemingly close, there was worry amongst the party as they traveled to King's Landing. But also, Arianne was worried for her good mother, for she saw how sad she had been at leaving her very unwell father behind in Riverrun. Upon arriving in King's Landing, Arianne saw a grand reception at the King's Gate. Among them was her husband, Uncle Oberyn and 7 knights of the Kingsguard. She beamed at seeing Robb standing in a silver doublet decorated a crown dark grey direwolf embroidered on it. The carriage stopped and Arianne climbed out, helped down by a Kingsguard, whom she recognized as Sir Torrhen Karstark. She knew the Karstark brothers well enough after the second of them, Eddard, had married her childhood friend, Silva Santiga, the future Lady of Spotswood. Your Grace, he said with a polite smile as he gently helped her down and bowed his head to her as she set foot on the ground. Thank you, Sir Torrhen, she said, carefully holding Halric in her arms. Arry, Robb said, running up to her and hugging her and kissing her. Your son, Robb, she said. Robb finally looked down at Halric. He took a few deep breaths as he looked down on him. Can I, he finally said. She handed Halric to Robb, who gently held him and kissed his forehead. Hello, my handsome little boy. Do you see this city? This is your home now, he whispered, gesturing to King's Landing. Looking at Halric and comparing him to Robb, she noticed how much similarities that they had. Halric may have had a lighter skin color than his mother, but it did appear to be sun-kissed. And he had inherited his father's beautiful dark blue eyes. His hair on the other hand looked like that of a Stark rather than his father's tully red hair. Halric's hair was black and wild with a slight curl. As they were escorted through the streets, Arianne looked around to see the roads were being washed and cleaned by small folk. Large carts full of food were being brought into the city to give to the hungry poor of King's Landing. Also being brought were carts of clothes and shoes. Very generous of you, Robb. She was amazed at the amount of blood, mud, dirt, vomit and shit all dried and caked on the roads and pavements. Already you're making a difference, she said to Robb. This is just the start. I worry I'm being too ambitious like my ancestor Brandon the Builder, he replied. He was a man who built such great structures that still stand today. Will you do the same, she asked. I'll pay the money required, but it won't be me that will organize it all. I don't know if you've heard, but the small council has been disbanded and replaced with the new Grand Council, he replied. What's so different about it? Are all of the members giants from the north, she asked. No, but there are newer positions and with fewer duties assigned to each member, he explained. And I heard a rumor. That the Iron Throne has been taken out of the throne room, she asked. Aye, that's true. I've sent for 2 new thrones, made of ironwood to be brought to the Red Keep. I sent for them just before we had left Riverrun. They should be here in time for the coronation, he explained. When is the coronation, she asked. 5 days from now, he said. Well, I'm sure that ironwood thrones will be more comfortable than the Iron Throne, she said. When we get to the Red Keep, I'll show you and you can sit down for yourself and see how horrible it is to sit on, Robb said with a chuckle. In the Red Keep, everything seemed to be getting ready for the coronation. There was a lot of grumbling from lords over wanting to return home to gather all of their crops and prepare their lands for the oncoming winter. All of this will soon be over, as soon as the Greyjoy see that all of Westeros will be united against them, especially now that the infighting is over and that their precious Iron Fleet is fucking nothing. Robb walked with Arianne to the cellar to show her the dragon skulls and finally, the Iron Throne. "Have you sat down on it?" she asked. "I have, it is horrible," he replied before she sat down. "What do you think?" Robb asked. "I hate this chair." No wonder so many Targaryens and Lannisters went mad from sitting down on this. Robert Baratheon must have made it suffer under his crushing weight to the extent that he didn't go mad. She quickly stood up and said, "I don't understand why Robert didn't get rid of it when he became king. He was slothful and was more interested in fighting, hunting, whoring and drinking than giving a damn about this ugly iron chair," said Robb. As they walked back upstairs, she said, "Please promise me something, Robb." "Anything," Robb replied. "Promise me that you will never be like Robert Baratheon, and that you will not be lazy or desperate to fight in an